All right, now, before inviting Simon and Philippe to join us, I'm going to play a short clip of a documentary being run by RT on YouTube on the 27th of May, that's tomorrow, in which Simon Roche says civil war in South Africa is inevitable. This is so relevant, and the reason the topic we're debating tonight is so important. Okay, let's have a look at that.
But if you will not obey the voice of the Lord your God, or be careful to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command you this day, then all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you.
All land in the hands of white people is stolen property, and therefore it must be returned to black people.
If they get rid of whites, all their problems will go away.
There's a lot of greed within the white community, especially in South Africa. They're untouchable.
White farmers in South Africa are being attacked every single day.
People being tortured to death, especially elderly people.
En het my oordrom gebars, my neus gebreek, my wangbene gebreek.
Like any other race, white also find themselves affected by crime, and we are also affected.
White people live like kings and queens, out of sweat and blood of black people.
What are you going to have for dinner?
Today, we don't have anything. I'm asking from my neighbors for food.
Civil war in South Africa is inevitable.
One bullet, one settler. One bullet, one settler.
And it shall not be in the power of your hand to prevent it.
Okay, dramatic stuff. Now that's going live on RT Monday morning, so just be aware of that. Now, let's get on to the debate, shall we? Okay, my name is Scott, for those who haven't been on the channel before, and I'll be moderating this debate, and the side chat will judge who the winner is. Now let me get Simon and Philippe on Skype, and we can just get the show on the road. I won't be a second. Hi Philippe, welcome to the great debate. Your camera's a bit low. I can just see it. Yeah, a bit more. That's a bit more, a bit lower, if you can. Or you'll have to sit a bit higher. That's perfect. Now it's just your.
You good with this?
Yeah. If you lean forward, that's better. Gee, you've grown your beard since I last saw you, haven't you?
We've had rain here. We've had rain. We've had a lot of rain.
Okay. I'm just getting Simon on the line, so we can just. What I'll do first, once Simon's on. Hi Simon, are you here? I can see his little icon, but I cannot. Let me just call him again.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Simon. I can't see you on camera.
My camera's on. Is it coming through yet?
Yeah, now it's come in. Perfect. Now I can see you. Gentlemen.
Okay, jolly good.
We have you both on. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go through how the debate is going to be run, so we both agree with the actual the format of the debate. Now let's get started on that. Okay. Before starting the debate, I'll give you each about 10 minutes to set out your argument, so that the people watching the live stream can see where you're coming from. I will ring a bell about 60 seconds before the 10-minute period expires, and I've actually got a Liberty Bell. I'll show you. It's rather cute. Hang on, let me just see if I can find it. There we go. There's... Oh, I've gone the wrong way around. There's a Liberty Bell that will be ringing. Okay, there we go. Now, getting back to the format.
Scott, sorry to interrupt you. I don't know how your screen sharing is working, but I can't see you. I can only see Philippe.
No, that's fine. That's perfect. We can see you both perfectly. You're all good.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll ring it.
I can see you good. How are you good?
All right, thanks, and you.
Excellent, my friend.
I'll ring a bell 60 seconds before the 10-minute period expires, just to warn the person talking that they've got about a minute to go. We'll start the debate by we'll start the debate by the debaters asking a question addressed to each other and related to the subject. The broad subject will be as per Simon's video response last week to Philippe's question. Once both debaters have finished with their questions, we will then move on to questions asked by email and then questions put in the side channel. Each debater will have 3 minutes to respond to the questions, and then the other debater 1 minute to respond. I'll ring the bell 30 seconds before the 3-minute response period expires and a few seconds before the 1-minute period expires. And you know what the bell sounds like. When I ring the bell a second time, please complete your point and then allow the moderator or the debater to respond. No verbal interruptions of the debater with the right to speak will be permitted. I have had a number of questions sent to me by email to be asked. I will start with those after Simon and Philippe have directed questions to each other. These questions will be the same time basis as the questions asked in the first segment between the debaters. I have asked Glenn to cut and paste all the questions related to the topic posted by side chat participants during the debate, and to paste those in the side chat for me to present to the debaters once we get to the stage of that debate. In other words, you can start posting your questions right now in the side chat. In the side chat, nominate your question, who your question is directed at. For example, Simon, what about this scenario? Or Philippe, what about this scenario? At the close of the debate, both Simon and Philippe will have 5 minutes to sum up their position. This way, both debaters will have the opportunity to present their positions to the audience. And finally, let me make it very clear to the viewing audience that this debate is centered on the topic of the videos I referred to earlier, based around the viabilities of Suidlanders' escape plan, and nothing else. Questions in the side chat, such as the financing of Suidlanders, will be ignored. Money is way down the priorities when it comes to survival. Let us focus on what this debate is all about. We can always invite Simon to discuss other aspects in a later live stream. On completion of the debate, I will ask the side chat to vote for the person they consider the winner. Simply type 1 for Simon and 2 for Philippe. The results we've posted after the video live stream is completed. A copy of this debate will be placed on the main Loving Life channel as well. Now, let me address the debaters. Do you agree to the format of the debate, Philippe?
Absolutely. I made the one with the nicest beard win.
Simon, do you agree with the format of the debate?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Scott. All I ask is that you remind me if I forget, the bell and what have you. It's not that we're ignoring the rules, but they got a little bit complicated there at one point, so you might have to remind me.
Okay, well, look, you've got an initial 10-minute intro. After I'm going to get Philippe to talk first, and then you'll talk after him for 10 minutes, and then for every single question directed to you, you have 3 minutes to respond. So it doesn't matter which part of the debate it is, and then at the conclusion we'll have a 5-minute summing up. Okay. And
okay.
If a question is directed, say at Simon, once you finish your 3-minute answer, then Philippe has the opportunity to respond for 1 minute if he wants to. Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna make notes, so
that's fine.
If it looks as if I'm not paying attention, on the contrary, I just don't want to lose the track of Philippe's points.
That's not a problem at all. Okay, so we'll start off with Philippe. Philippe, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Simon, this is not a war. I actually agree that one needs a plan in the current South Africa. And to an extent, I'm a fan of SL. So we are not at war with one another. My misgivings are as follows. I refer to a very wise man who lived many centuries ago, a fellow by the name of Sun Tzu. And he wrote a book called The Art of War. And that Art of War book was prescribed reading when I did my officers training and then later for an MBA as well. And it centers on strategy and tactics, knowing your enemy, choosing your battleground, choosing the time, choosing the weapons, and a whole lot more. And this strategy has been followed with great success in many theaters. Now, when we look at the situation in South Africa, the strategy as far as SL is concerned, Suidlanders is concerned, does not exist as far as I'm concerned, because basically you get very little warning and you are reactionary of necessity, I grant you that. But once trouble starts in an urban environment, and we've seen that very recently as well, streets, city centers, on-ramps, off-ramps can be closed in minutes, and can be closed very simply by a couple of burning tires, rocks, a marauding bunch, whatever it is, but no one gets in and out. So that is a first weak point. How do they get out of Dodge? Secondly, when you get out of Dodge and you have a trailer full of goodies with you, you are a massive target. Yes, you guys are armed. Yes, there is some training. I accept all of that. But with the current police situation and law situation, you may not shoot, you may not fire on people who are stealing things from you. Whether that is wise or not is another story entirely. But you may only use deadly force when your life is in danger or you stand to get injuries from which you may not recover, very serious injuries. At any other time, you may not shoot. So if they surround a car, or worse, if they surround a column, and there is no immediate threat of threat to life, and all they want is the goodies in and out of the car, on top of the car and the trailer, if not the car itself, and they are not threatening you directly, it's simply a mobbing and they open the doors, smash the windows, you can't shoot for injury to property either. You may not, you must not. If you do, it's a very serious criminal charge. You're now looking at attempted murder or murder outright. So if they surround you as a Southlander in a convoy or on your own trying to get to an assembly point, you have no defense if somebody wants to rob you or clean you out. It's over, unless you wish to break the law. Similarly, we now have weapons for self-defense and weapons for other purposes, for hunting or sport shooting. The only weapons allowed on you for self-defense are the ones on a white self-defense license. Any others may not be used as such. So if they are used, if a general license is used for self-defense, again you are in trouble and those weapons may be confiscated at a roadblock. Now, if you enter a roadblock and some idiot points a gun at the security forces, police or army or joint operation, you will be shot. It will be over in seconds. It will be over in no time. And once that pandemonium breaks out, there is no stopping it anymore because the police and the army do not have the discipline that the old forces had. It's over. The other thing of bringing men under arms, thousands, tens of thousands of them, and there is a command structure of 42 staff officers. That cannot be argued to be a self-defense or a civil defense unit. That's in fact an army. So in terms of the provisions of the act that governs civil defense, that is already a no-no. That's gone. Similarly, if someone were to commit an offense whilst in a convoy, or in a protected area, in a safe area, that area can be visited and can be entered by the police, by the army, to extract the ones who are accused of committing crimes. Furthermore, should you be in a protected area, in a safe area, and a crowd of people who are hungry or simply want what you've got enter without threat to life to you or your people, you may not shoot. You must not shoot. You can lay a charge, you can call the cops for whatever good it will do. I think we're in agreement that it will do absolutely no good. But you must not shoot these people. You cannot defend yourself unless there is a threat to life. If you do, you commit a very serious offense, and your status as a civil defense unit falls by the wayside. It's over. It's finished. You are now fugitives. You are now wanted criminals. The other problem that I have is once you have a protected area, and that protected area cannot be filled because of circumstances, and all those people are redirected to another safe area. If that area was already planned to capacity, you're now doubling it up or even tripling it up. How are you going to look after these people? It's not going to be possible. The bit that really worries me most is that you're going to have basically untrained people who are not fit in a combat situation. It is bad enough if you've got young, strong, hard young men fighting in an army environment and in a complete logistics environment, logistically mature environment. Even that doesn't work. Look at 1984 when they had Thunder Chariot in La Hatla. That was 6 months in the planning. With the army, they had air support, they had everything, they had logistics coming out their ears. The whole thing was a mess, and it failed on logistics. You are not going to get resupplied. There is no resupply, no resupply in your circumstances. And to take these people en masse out of a potentially safe environment into an area where everything is a great unknown, because I have had no evidence that you guys actually had a dry run with serious numbers, and I'm looking at thousands or even tens of thousands, not 20 or 30 shooting paper on a target range, but thousands, to see how this would actually work, and if you can process them, and if you can feed them and look after them. There is also no mention, as far as my understanding goes, of what happens with people who are sick, who are wounded. But worst of all, and I stand open to correction, but this is what I have been advised, is that Southland in extremis will simply commandeer an area with everything in it, police stations, hospitals, what have you. If you move into an area and clean out a hospital for your own purposes, the medications and the supplies in it are meant for the people in that area and are adequate for people in that area. Take them away, that area has nothing, and you're taking it away for a possible event, possibility. Similarly, if you were to enter a police station and commandeer it, or commandeer whatever you want, you are now committing very serious offenses, and you're actually out of the realm of a civil defense unit protected under the civil defense flag of the United Nations and the High Commission for Refugees. There are so many holes in what you guys do, not your intentions. I don't have a problem with your intentions. I think your intentions are on the money. Get out of Dodge while you can, try and organize yourself and let it basically burn itself out. No issue with that. I have an issue with how you're doing it, the scale of it, the law as it pertains, dealing with totally unskilled people in terms of fighting and punching paper and what have you doesn't count. And in a convoy, should things go wrong, in a convoy, you actually are not protected under the regulations for civil defense. And if the first car and the last car are stopped by some reason, everybody in between is jammed in. They have no ways of escape. And if shooting starts, they are locked into a car. Women, children, non-combatants. I think that situation is very, very dangerous and cannot succeed. I think you're reckless in that regard, with respect. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Philippe. Okay, now I'm going to hand over to you now, Simon, to state your case, and then we'll ask the questions after we've finished that section. Over to you.
Scott, can I give some of my time to Philippe in order for him to describe what is the better alternative? And I don't mean it as a trick question. I'm struggling to comprehend a little bit, and I'd like to conduct this debate as well as possible, representing my organization. And I'm not sure that I can. It's basically, there's a crisis. We agree that something must be done, but it mustn't be this thing. It would help me a lot if I understood what he thinks should be done.
Philippe, do you want to respond to that, or would you rather just ask questions later?
Your decision.
Simon has said that he's happy for you to take some of his time.
Okay, I'm happy. This is not a fight to the death or a race. This is merely an opinion situation between Simon's and mine. That's all it is, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not at war with you at all. My view is that a possibility of saving yourself, and if ESCOM fails, and I think that will be the major trigger to all sorts of unpleasantness in South Africa, that will trigger an avalanche of consequences. My choice would be to set up privately or with very few families, if that, maybe 2, 3 maximum, a connection with farmers. Store my equipment, store my stores there so that I can fly under the radar when I'm on my way there. No trailers, nothing worth stealing, pretty much as we call it, the little grey man image. Have that in place, in situ, well before trouble breaks out. And if trouble breaks out, go for it. The other thing is that being very small in numbers, it is far easier logistically to supply food, shelter for 1 or 2 families than it is for 1,000 or for 2,000. So yes, I would agree that one needs to plan, but in those numbers and with these logistics behind it, I don't think that would succeed. The other thing is that one could argue, and that is also an opinion that I have, that being in town, one is very visible. There is press, there are consulate facilities, embassies in certain places, but there's certainly press, there's certainly authorities. My take on it is that cities and towns will be sanitized, will be organized by the security forces before outlying areas are sanitized, because they are so much more visible. And my view is that the ANC will want to try and save face and create some semblance of order. So if you can stick it out in a house, and you have a swimming pool full of water, and you have a street with people who are similar in thought, and you can block it off, and you're away from, what do you call these things, shopping centers and what have you, you might be better off actually staying at home and bugging in rather than bugging out. The hospitals will function in cities and in towns far more than they would be in the middle of nowhere. They would organize support in hospitals for injured before they would do that anywhere else. So my option is, if you can't get out, because that is very much a question, once they start blocking access roads to freeways and city centers and what have you, you're not going anywhere. You're a target, and once you're trapped in that lot, whatever you've got is gone. So an option might be to bug in rather than to bug out. If you bug out, yes, bug out, but organize yourself well before that in very small numbers with farmers, have your stores in place, have everything you need in place there, and ride it out. So bugging out, bugging in, you've got to do something. I don't have an issue with that at all. But with the sheer logistics that you guys are working with, I don't see it. I really don't see it, and you haven't got a single mass exercise to your name as far as I'm aware. I'm open to correction, where you actually tested a mass movement of tens of thousands of people and then redirect them to see if that would work, and accommodate them and feed them and have issues such as water supply and pollutions. There is no dress rehearsal in numbers to see if what you guys designed actually works. And once trouble starts, you're a minute late and $1 short. So that would be my take on doing things. I applaud you for doing something. I don't have any issue with that. It's just the sheer logistics of it. I've been involved in logistics as a pilot. I wouldn't have flown a meter without certain logistics in place. And I know how important, how critical it is. Going back to Thunder Chariot in 1984, when the army had 6 months to plan for it, they only had a quarter of your members to look after, 20,000 people. And it was one big mess, was a snafu from beginning to end. So looking at that, looking also at Sun Tzu's approach, I'm sure you've heard of Sun Tzu and what he wrote, it's prescribed reading all over the place. Following that, because it works. That is what I miss in Suidlanders. Not your idea to do something and to get out of Dodge and to protect vulnerable people. I have no trouble with that at all. But the sheer size, the sheer logistics, the fact that people are not disciplined the way they are in an army environment, one might start shooting. I've had regard for that as well, in my opinion, when the AWB raided Botswana and they were told to turn tail and get out. One idiot in that convoy, they were a heavily armed convoy, and those guys had all been in the army, all of them, they were young. One lot opened up on an army roadblock, the Bob Army roadblock. The car was shot from under them. They were pulled out of the car. They were complaining that they're entitled to an ambulance. Heavily wounded, lying outside the car, full on camera. A cop walked up with an R5 and shot him point blank in the chest and killed him. It's over. Once these things start and once people lose discipline, discipline is survival. It's over, and you sit with tens of thousands of people who are not disciplined, children, women, all transported in the same convoy. How are you going to run that show? I don't know. But I wouldn't be part of it. It would be way too risky. But small numbers, private arrangements, stores in place well before that, get out of Dodge before the streets are closed, and stay out of Dodge. That is your attitude. Have your stores, have your weapons if you need them. You can't use them, Simon. You do that and you want to get a visa as a refugee later. You're fried. No country will have you. If you get a police check and these guys say that you opened up on security forces, they will not take you. And that is not the purpose of the exercise. You want to survive it, and if South Africa is no longer a viable option, you want to have refugee status under your civil defense flag, expedite visa to people who will accept you and give you a new chance on life, at least for a few years. Once you become a rogue element due to a number of people that you cannot control, and you start taking casualties because of it, your standing is over. It's finished. No country in Europe will take people who shoot police and army and commandeer police stations and hospitals. They won't do it. And your logistics is my problem, not your intention. Your logistics and the people you're actually working with. Does that answer your question? Does that help you?
Yeah, the first part did, where you were describing your options. The rest, I think I understood already what you're anti, what you're contra. So I really just needed to hear that first sort of minute. Let me say to begin with that Suidlanders' plan is very, very highly developed. Whether you agree or disagree is not.
Sorry, just to interrupt a second. I'm going to give you an extra 5 minutes, Simon, just to respond to Philippe, and then we'll get on to the questions. Okay.
Agreed, Scott. Agreed.
Okay. Cool.
The plan is very, very, very highly developed. If anybody would like an overview of our plan, anybody listening to this, they should send an email to hk@suidlanders.co.za and my secretary will send them a copy of our handleiding, our manual, which in Afrikaans is about 245 pages long. Afrikaans being a very expressive language. In English, it takes more words to say the same thing, and it's about 282 pages. And there you can get an overview of our national emergency plan. That's the first thing to say. The second thing I'd like to say is that if anybody wants to really delve into our reasoning, there is a video which is a private video. It's a Suidlanders only video. It's a members only video. You know, we have to have some benefits for our members, which we are making available for 1 week only. It will be open to all, and Scott has the link, and I trust that he has posted it already. And there people can spend an hour and 38 minutes listening to our kind of young genius, Ernst van den Berg, describing everything in detail, and particularly the background, which is very important. And I think that will be helpful. It is also important that I mention before I go on that we are very heavily biblically influenced, and you needn't agree with that. That's okay. One of the influences is the prophet Sina van Rensburg, and he gave 4 prophecies which appear to be interlinked. In the first one, whether people like it or not, this informs our thinking. This is who we are. This is how we reason the matter. In the first one, he said, when the troubles begin, die behoudendes is klaar aan die oever van die groot rivier. The conservatives, the true Afrikaner Boers, are already on the banks of the Orange River. Die groot rivier is the old name for the Orange River. Is the operative word. Hulle is daar. They are there. Please remember that word. He then gave another prophecy that, as I say, appears to be linked to the first, is generally regarded to be linked to the first, in which he said, Ek gaan af na die weste toe. And in his prophecies, he represents not the behoudende, suiwer, stoere boere. He represents the Afrikaner boervolk, the average dude. So I go off to the west. Now, from his farm, that would be just a few miles to our sector line. The operative word is go. Just go. In the third prophecy, he said, Hulle, die grijshoender, meaning the jingo Afrikaner, the non-faithful Afrikaner, the Afrikaner who is assimilated into modern globalist ideas, who doesn't have old-fashioned values. Haul. So sprints under the wire into a safe area. The wire obviously representing something like a border or a barrier. Sprints. So we have is or are in a place. I am in this chair. I go. They sprint. And in the fourth one he said, Hulle vlug in die leeu se bek in. They flee into the mouth of the lion. So whether you want to get spiritual or mystical about this thing or not, the fact remains, this is our reasoning. Which brings me to the point that we believe even more fervently than you do, because it's almost like an article of faith, that many people will not make it. But we are obliged, we believe, to provide some kind of a national emergency plan. It would be well and good for us to look after ourselves. I could spend a few years preparing and I would be okay, Jack. There are places that I could go to in South Africa that no matter how bad things got, I would be one of the last, and my family, my children, their mothers, my mommy and my daddy, my brothers and my sister would be amongst the very, very last people harmed. But as a matter of conscience, we believe that we should present a plan to the people, for as many people to accept or reject as they like. Now that plan is based on small groups. So we again agree strongly with you that one of the fundamental principles of the success of this thing is to leave early. You alluded to that in your solution. Secondly, in your solution, you spoke about, you said leave before the trouble begins, and I've just addressed that, and you spoke about small group connections with farmers, smaller scale logistics. Again, we agree very strongly with you. We're on the same page. Many of our members, our structure works as follows. We have the now and the then. The now is intended purely to build a capacity for the then. I'm going to speak only about the now. The now is composed of the individual,
Simon,
the family.
Simon, can you make this the last point? We're over the time now.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear the bell. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The individual, the family, the small group, the region, and the province. And right across the length of our sectors, all the way from Botswana to Bloemfontein, there are many, many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small caches of logistics to which you alluded.
Okay, fantastic. Now, I'll just tell you, we've got about 450 people watching the live stream at the moment. We're going to start the questions now. So, Philippe, if you'd like to start with a question for Simon, and Simon, you have 3 minutes to respond, and I will ring the bell after when you get down to about 30 seconds. Okay, over to you, Philippe.
Thanks for that, Simon. Simon, I hear you that that we're on the same page with regard to small units, but those small units are not represented in the assembly places. You're looking at hundreds, and they're certainly not represented in the safe areas where you're looking at thousands possibly. You're also talking about the Orange River. I understood that much from what I already knew. But that whole area along the river is actually owned by other people. How are they going to accept an incursion of tens of thousands, probably maybe even up to 80,000 people, into their own lands? How would they accept that? And the other thing is, what are and I respect your religious views. I have nowhere have you mentioned that you actually had a dry run, proper dress rehearsal, if you will, of note, of size, to see if what you have planned actually works.
Philippe?
No,
Philippe.
That has never been done. Could you possibly help me there, assist me there?
Okay, yeah, we need to ask questions, guys. All right.
Okay, so the only question that I heard as a question was, how are we going to move into these areas? Look, it's exactly the same as the principle that you proposed, Philippe, except writ large. We're not going to put 100,000 people onto one farm. We're going to put 1 million people, we hope. We generally work on the number 800,000, but it's an unwieldy mathematical number. So let's use 1 million for a round number. 1 in 6 white people. Maybe it'll be 1 in 12, it doesn't matter. But our intention is to put 1 million people over 880 kilometers. So it's perhaps not the way that you perceive it to be. I don't have a better answer than that. It goes to this principle of encumbering these areas with as little pressure as possible so that they are sustainable. And the area in question, I must emphasize this with respect, once and for all, produces a disproportionate amount of food for its population. In other words, there is more food there, produced there annually. I'm talking about irrigation farming, non-irrigation farming, game farming, sheep farming, cattle farming. I'm talking about precisely, I'll think of the number now, 120 times 2 is 240 and 360 is 600. 600 megawatts of turbine electricity, over 1,000 megawatts of wind-driven electricity, and something like 2,000 megawatts of sun-generated electricity. So it's an area which is able to sustain, by definition, it is an area that produces more than it consumes. It's able to sustain large numbers of people. Now, again, in fact, ask your next question. I'll have more than enough opportunity to elaborate.
Well, have you finished, Simon?
Yeah, I think so.
Now, over to you, Philippe. You can respond to that. You've got a minute to respond to that.
Thank you. Simon, my question was also, have you actually ever had a sizable dry run to see if you can organize that? There was a second leg to that question, and is how do these people along the Orange River view the incursion of all these people onto their farms? Every single one of them. Do you have permission for them to be there? And my remark in my opening statement was, when people want what you have, even in your safe area, and they come and try and get it, you can't shoot them. You can't actually push them back. You can lay a charge, as I said, but you can't do much more than that. How do you keep these people away when they want what you have?
Okay. Now,
that's my question, Scott.
Okay, cool. Now, what we'll do is we'll take that as another question, Simon. So 3 minutes for those two questions. Yeah.
All right, fine. Philippe, no, we've never had a large-scale exercise involving, let's say, 100,000 people, and we would never get it right to do it. It's just impossible. So what we depend on quite heavily is, I should first point out to you, I mentioned before, our structure is based, our now structure is like the Boy Scouts of South Africa, little groups all over the show that contribute to a region, let's say the central Transvaal region or the central Gauteng region of the Boy Scouts, and then the northern region, etc. So we have the individual, the family, the group, the region, the province. Each of those has an area dedicated to it, a farm dedicated to it. So what we depend upon quite heavily is rehearsals on a smaller scale. When the dudes in Natal can agree that they're going to do a Suidlanders exercise rather than watch rugby or this or that, whatever, when they can get it together, then they exercise and rehearse together. And last year, we had, in fact, it wasn't last year, it was up to the period June or July last year, the previous 12 months, we had, if I'm not mistaken, 879 such exercises. So it is going on a fantastic scale, just not all at once. As far as the private property is concerned, bear in mind that we're talking about a particular scenario, nationwide anarchy. Now, for those, I'm not patronizing anybody, please don't get me wrong. This is for those who don't know, who are unfamiliar with the term, or whose first language is not English. Anarchy means only one thing. It means without authority, without government, without a ruler, without law and order, without that oppergesag. In such circumstances, not other circumstances, in such circumstances, if a group of people was to come to a farm which had not been pre-designated, of course, there are many thousands, literally, of farmers who are sympathetic to us and who have said, if such and such happens, as you are proposing it, I'll gladly have you on my land. I cannot offhand think of one farmer who has turned us down. In such a scenario, if there is nationwide anarchy, if there is a breakdown of law and order, and if gangs of people are marauding and plundering, firstly, the wealthiest areas, obviously, and secondly, implicitly, white areas, because whites are seen as the haves in a society of haves and have-nots. Now, if it should occur, as you mentioned, in an electricity blackout, it goes without saying that it would be daft to remain in your suburb, because without electricity there's no clean running water. It can't be pumped. It also means that all of the sewerage overflows in all of the streets all of the time, because it cannot be pumped through either. It also means that there's no food on the shelves, because nobody's going to come into the cities in such circumstances to deliver food. Besides which, there will be no fuel at the fuel stations, because not every fuel station has a standby generator to pump fuel. So you're talking about a scenario in which there's no clean running water at all, none. No electricity, cholera, typhoid, enteric running wild in the suburbs, and no food on the shelves, and very little defensibility of white suburbs. I mean, that's a given. The average guy with his .223 that he uses once every 4 years to shoot a bushbuck, and the 27 rounds that he's got spare from his last hunting trip, is meaningless. And the few handguns, again, meaningless in a situation of nationwide anarchy. In a situation of nationwide anarchy in which there's been a complete breakdown of law and order, it is reasonable to assume that thirsty, hungry, cold people will plunder the softest targets and the richest targets. The ripest fruit and the lowest hanging fruit is the average white, so to speak, or formerly white suburb, and that is the particular scenario for which we are planning. So I may not have responded to your question perhaps in the way that you'd hoped, but certainly this is the way that we would put the scenario by way of response.
Thanks, Simon. Now, back to you, Philippe. You have a minute to respond to what Simon said.
Simon, I dealt with some of that with the bugging in scenario in my opening statement. And I also mentioned that the first bite of the cherry with regard to army and police presence and facilities will be in the big cities because they're camping and they need to show face. So if it is a couple of days, I'm not too sure that that would be a problem. Secondly, disease in camps, if you've got a large area where you're putting these people together, the threat of disease is great, and you don't have any sanitation services. You do not have doctors, you do not have nurses, you do not have isolation facilities. So you are very much at risk wherever you go. The other side of it is that I am advised, and I hear you about your length of the Orange River, is that people have to hand in their chattels. They have to hand in their car, their goods, their stores, and everything.
Oh, that's nonsense. I beg your pardon. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'll take it back. Sorry.
Okay. Okay.
If it is nonsense, I'm done with that question. Actually, I asked him. If that is nonsense, it should not be asked. But that is what I heard, and I had a question about that and the redistribution of it. But my question is, do you agree that bugging in may well be a viable option if you have that swimming pool that I talked about, neighbors who have one, like minds, stores in place, rather than risk going out into the streets and then out of town where you're utterly and totally unprotected?
Well, to answer your question, no, we don't agree. We feel quite strongly that that's completely unfeasible. And, you know, Philippe, you might be right, we might be wrong. You know, it doesn't have to be a combative discussion. But we believe very firmly, on the basis of history, we've studied other civil wars extensively. We have, as you know, the input of a number of experts in this field. We travel extensively internationally to get advice. We're heavily researched. It just doesn't work like that.
I have lived in an area that was under siege, a rural area. And we were safe. In South Africa, we were safe because of the internal organization between us. And because we had a regular police presence. Anarchy does not mean that there is no government, that there is no police force, that there is no law, that there is no armed forces. In fact, the armed forces and the police will be joined, because that's what happened in the 80s as well. I was part of that structure. And there will be extended powers to the security forces, powers of search, seizure, and arrest to the army, for example. Also the power to stop congregations. The first thing that people want is mobs, to get what they want. The police and the army are there to protect themselves in the first place. So they're going to get people off the streets. Those who don't obey are easily identifiable as rogues and will be dealt with. that is what you're going to get. A warrant officer, in terms of the last situation that we had in the 80s and early 90s, has the right to prohibit congregations of over 6 people. Your convoys may well be subject to that prohibition, particularly when they have arms and are prepared to use them. And you've stated that publicly, that may be the case, and these guys know about it. In towns as well, they will be buttoned up. I was in the police reserve. I was trained to do this sort of stuff. They will be buttoned up. The only guys on the streets will be bad guys, and if it is a running battle, the police will take them out and the army will take them out. If you do not obey instructions at a roadblock, or you run into people who are rogue, you will be dealt with similarly. And you have no control over these untrained people. They will put everybody at risk. I hear you expect to lose a few, but that should not be the case. I would ask you, are you planning a large-scale exercise to see if your plans work on a large scale, and what the snags are that you run into in terms of practical purposes? Otherwise, it is one big what-if exercise, and people are going to put their lives at risk and their family and whatever they've got. Thank you. Okay, so was that a question for Simon, Philippe? Yes, it was. Okay. I'm trying to understand. Okay. Philippe, Simon, over to you.
I don't know what is the question.
Do you want to repeat the question, Philippe?
Of course I can. The plugging in situation. In my opening statement, I said, provided that you've got water, for example, a swimming pool, and in your street you've got plenty of people with a swimming pool, that you have stores at hand, that you have prep stores at hand for at least a couple of days or a week. The army and the police will be in place. They will be there. There will be a government. There will be law. It may not look like it, but there is. Army and police will be given special powers in those circumstances. They will keep mobs off the streets. They will actually have curfews. And if you are on the street, you are now a target for the police and for the army, because you're identifiable. These curfews and these restrictions on numbers may also be imposed on your gathering areas and on your safe areas and on your convoys, to protect the police, to protect the army, and keep armed people off the streets. Black or white, makes no difference. Not to them anymore. How are you going to deal with that? And how are you going to deal with a large-scale exercise to see if your plans actually work? I mentioned Thunder Chariot, that was one big mess up. Okay. With a fraction of the people that you intend to move. How do you know it will work? Okay. Simon, over to you.
I'm not sure that I understand. Okay, Philippe said he's given a long description 6 or 8 times about all of the suppliers and the like-minded people in the suburbs and so on. And he has concluded by saying, how will we deal with it? That was the question. How will we deal with it? We won't deal with it. We are not preparing a scenario in which people are drinking water out of their swimming pools. We are not preparing for a scenario in which the residents of goodness knows where, Constantia, are like-minded as we are. I mean, it's with respect, a spurious question. It makes no sense. It's like me asking Scott, how does it feel to be a woman? He's going to say, you're being daft, I'm a man. We're not going to deal with that scenario. We are not planning to bug in. So we are not going to, I don't know how else to put this.
I think the question was actually, are you going to have a large-scale trial run of thousands of people?
That was the second question. Yeah. It was prefaced by 6 or 8 minutes of description. Yeah. How are you going to deal with it? Then it was the trial run part. Okay. The trial run, let me respond to that second question again. I'm not going to give a different response, but I'm willing to do it twice. It is not possible to get every single Suidlanders member to be available at the same time on the same Saturday morning to do a nationwide exercise simultaneously. But thankfully, as I've described already, our national emergency plan is based upon small groups, regions and provinces that will go to their own devoted sectors. Therefore, it may not be good enough for Philippe or for other people, that's okay. But the fact remains, in our opinion, it is good enough for us that the Natal guys rehearse their convoy going to their sector. And if there were 100 other convoys going at the same time, but going to different places, it would be of no benefit and no advantage because they wouldn't be going to the same place. You know, Scott rehearsing going to the shops and me rehearsing going to the shops, when it's two different shops, it doesn't matter if it happens at the same time. As long as the people who are going to the same place rehearse together. And last year, up until, I think it was the month of June, June or July, the State Security Agency of South Africa issued a report, not issued, had a report, internal report, on Suidlanders and 3 other right-wing organizations. And a couple of pages were leaked. And in that report, they said that Suidlanders had, to that point, to the point of the writing of the report, assuming that it was leaked at more or less the same time, there wasn't a date on it, assuming that it was leaked at more or less approximately the same time that it was published, they said that over the preceding 12 months, Suidlanders had had something like 879 exercises, and they were speaking specifically in the context of convoys, flight, refugees, safe area. We are not all going to the same place. We have a long string of what we call ontvangsektoren. I think I've said this ad nauseum.
Okay. Now, just to put the shoe on the other foot, is there a question you'd like to ask Philippe, Simon?
No, I don't have a question as such, and I think that that's semi-natural because we're not really discussing Philippe's solution, and sure. I understand
I just
solution. I hear it, and it's similar to other side. I don't have a need, I'm not being funny,
yeah.
I don't have a need to interrogate, you know what I mean? Yeah. The interrogation is more my direction. What I can do is maybe make some observations. I'll keep them brief, and he can respond to them as if they were questions. I don't mind at all.
Okay, do that.
I would put it to you, Philippe, that people should be cognizant, and of course, Suidlanders members are cognizant of this, that we have 6 distinct phases. The first 3 phases operate on the prerogative of the provincial and regional leaders. So a person in, let's say, Witbank, a leader in Witbank, might say to his people, let's go to phase 1, which is a gathering in the town. Okay, so we haven't left the suburbs. We believe that we're okay in the suburbs. There isn't nationwide anarchy. There isn't plundering. There isn't marauding. The government has the situation under control. Anarchy can be used theoretically, but as you, Philippe, have correctly pointed out, there is some semantic nuance there. So there exists a government, right? So we gather in the town. That's phase 1. And we think things are getting quieter. We'll go back home and sleep on it, and we'll keep in touch with one another by radio. We have a very, 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 very extensive radio system. We have the 2nd largest radio system in South Africa after the South African government. Phase 2 is to gather just outside the town. So we believe inherently the built-up areas will be the areas of greatest threat, even if other people don't believe that. So, if necessary, we will gather outside of town, 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, and wait it out there overnight. It's not an indefinite scenario at all. Phase 3, again, at the prerogative of the leaders, or on the prerogative of the leaders, is to go to what we call a visvangplek. It might be a place, in the case of, I'll give you an example in point, in the case of our West Rand of Johannesburg, under the leadership of our provincial leader, Wimberto Schwan, they have a visvangplek that is about 60 kilometers, I'm kind of guessing, out of town, and there they can remain indefinitely because it's in an area that's not built up. It's an area of very little threat. It's an area where there is a farm where the farmer has said, come by all means. There's an almost infinite supply of clean water, and there is a hang of a lot of food. not even to mention the preparations that people will take with them. Then the fourth is to go to the fourth phase, and this is by order. So in other words, if matters have escalated beyond the scenario where it's okay to remain in town, where you are not endangering the welfare of your family by remaining, there is a clear and present danger in the town, and you must go. And you've gone out through phase 1, through phase 2, phase 3, our HQ may say, as a matter of Suidlanders policy, we are ordering our people to leave the cities, or to leave the cities in this region, or to leave the cities in this province, or to leave this specific city, let's say Johannesburg for argument's sake. Now, people are, of course, in a position to defy that order, and they may well choose to do so. But the fact remains that phases 4, 5, and 6 are by order of our organization. And phase 4 is to go to the sector, the receiving sector, which is pre-planned, pre-prepared. Phase 5 is to adjust the sector line. Now, obviously, one would do that if there was an extreme scenario in South Africa, nationwide anarchy, as we would express it. Not to get into a semantic dispute with Philippe, I heard what he said. But let's say there is a real and actual complete breakdown of law and order, and the government doesn't have control. And the 145,000 police officers that we possess in the Republic of South Africa, who are preoccupied by dramas in Pretoria and Johannesburg and Durban and East London and Port Elizabeth and Grahamstown and the whole of the Eastern Cape and the Southern Cape and Cape Town, and come on, guys. That's of the 145,000 that report to work. The likelihood is that we're not going to be overwhelmed by a fantastic presence of gendarmerie. Let's talk realistically now. In circumstances of real, actual anarchy, where there's a breakdown of law and order, those few police and soldiers who may yet be reporting for duty are not likely to be overwhelming in number. We're not talking about Stalin's 30 reserve Siberian divisions that he held until 1944. You know, so we're saying under such circumstances, phase 5 is to adjust our lines, move back a bit, forward a little bit, shift away a little bit, do whatever is most peaceful and most sensible and causes the least friction and the least drama. And finally, phase 6 is the scenario in which we absolutely have to, by all common sense, create a perimeter line and say this is a declared safe zone under international law. It is a region in which we are kicking out very few other people because there are very few other people here. And we will defend this region. I don't want to get onto the resupply thing that Philippe did mention, but of course then we could talk about resupply, and we do have a solution. We have a very good solution. But in that phase 6, we would be building a sustainable, defensible, safe area for our people. And Philippe, you're welcome to respond. Take as long as you like. I know that that's a bit of a long-winded stelling that I've made there.
Now, Philippe, would you like to ask questions related to what Simon's just said, or would you like to respond to that?
Simon, there is a major what if, and that is that people can actually get out of town and that they can go places. So that is your first bit. Now, once they're between a rock and a hard place because they're no longer in their home, they're not in a safe place, they're at the mercy of whatever comes their way. Secondly, once you organize lots of little groups, as you say, they become a big group. Now, yes, they do. If you add lots of little groups in a provincial area, you have to deal with nearly 1 million people. Somewhere along the line, large fraction of
you're not listening to my explanation. I've said this at least a dozen times tonight.
Hang on a second. Carry on, Philippe, please.
Thank you. All right. So, simple maths, say that if you congregate lots of smaller groups into a larger area, you're going to get a much bigger group. Now, if you even look at moving 2,000 or 3,000 people, I'm not talking about 100,000 or 1,000,000, but 2,000 or 3,000 people and see how that goes. But that hasn't happened either. To have 20 or 30 people go and punch paper in holes with pistols and run up and down doesn't really make for a safe place. Secondly, once you start shooting people from your safe place, if people who are hungry come to you and you say you are defending, you are out of bounds with the law. You may not do that. You lose the moral high ground. It is only when your life is in danger, in terms of South African law, if you flout that law at any time, you are no longer a protected civil defense organization. You're now a felon and perhaps even a fugitive.
Okay, now
you will no longer be regarded as such.
Philippe,
how do you see?
Philippe, can I get Simon to respond to that?
Of course, of course.
Scott, I don't have anything new to add. You know, I've already described that the area is strung out, or the receiving sectors.
Simon, the question was that you're breaking the law.
Yeah, but we're not. Firstly, we don't have felony laws in South Africa. Secondly, in circumstances of civil war, in the worst case scenario, in a phase 6, international law, and Philippe knows this because we went backwards and forwards through you last week, Scott. We're speaking specifically about international law. Under circumstances of civil war, we would take refuge under the aegis of international law, to which South Africa is a signatory, firstly. And this is a highly unusual thing. So I urge your viewers to please pay attention to what I'm saying, because it's a highly uncommon thing. South Africa did not only ratify the Geneva Conventions and the protocols additional to the Geneva Conventions. South Africa took the highly unusual step of incorporating it into the corpus of South African law. South African law has all sorts of laws about speeding, about drinking, about beating your wife, whatever. Within the South African corpus of law, there you will find sitting the Geneva Conventions and the protocols additional to the Geneva Conventions. It is under circumstances of nationwide anarchy. It is in circumstances of civil war. It is in the worst case scenario. It is in the phase 6 that I took pains to describe, that we would then legally, very, very, very much legally, under South African law and under international law, then declare a safe zone that is exclusive to the identifiable ethnic group that occupies it, which is the terms used by the Geneva Conventions in the, in the protocols additional to the Geneva Conventions, particularly, and I mention this for those of your viewers who may be interested in looking it up, particularly Protocol 60, or Articles 60 to 69 of Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions. I don't know, Scott, if I must say the same thing in different words, or
no,
you know,
that's fine.
As if we're circling the same mulberry bush.
No, but look, it's good that we get clarification. Now, Philippe, do you want to respond to what Simon's just said?
Oh, absolutely, because local law, national law, takes precedence over the Geneva Convention. It takes precedence over United Nations regulations, and your safe area may be proclaimed unilaterally by your people, but you have no right to breach local law. And if you do, the Geneva Convention will not protect you. It will not. It cannot. It cannot even do that in terms of war or after war, and there are actually ample examples of that. For example, going back to the Second World War, people were actually executed after the war because a German military court found them guilty, and they actually had to be executed. And they were. Local law takes precedence over international law. That international law is a prescription. It is nothing else. And I think you know that if you really want to go for the Geneva Convention only applies in a declared state of war between sovereign nations who are signatories. South Africa actually tried to get out of these regulations. They resigned from it, and then they were actually put back into it. I don't know if you know about that. I'm sure you do. But that's not material at the moment. It's not material at the moment. But you are bound, and you can be tried, and you will be tried, and you will be tried in an international forum if it comes to it. If you commit crimes against humanity, which may include shooting unarmed people who want to eat, who actually walk all that distance to your safe places and want what you will be tried. Have a look at what happened in terms of minorities in Kosovo and Yugoslavia. They claimed that they were Muslims, they claimed that they were Christians, and they were at each other's throats. They were brought before court, and a couple of these guys are sitting life sentences. They are not protected. They actually offended against their own country's laws, and they were brought to trial. They were brought to trial in The Hague. And they said, if you have a look at crimes against humanity and that shooting unarmed people may well be that, a bunch of people were actually strung up in Nuremberg following Nuremberg trials for the same thing. You are not protected by a unilateral declaration of how you want to run things. Not now, not ever. So my position is still simple. You may declare your area a safe area in terms of whatever flag you want to fly. You are subject to law. And if you flout that, you are at risk. Thank you.
Simon, do you want to respond?
Oh, no, please.
Okay. Well, look, all I would suggest is that perhaps, Philippe is a very knowledgeable man. Perhaps you should just have a look at what Philippe is saying and just perhaps come back to us at a later stage. But let's move on to another question.
Well, look, I'm not going to come back. Let's put it this way. We'd never ever tried to get out of the Geneva Conventions. There was the Rome Treaty. And the Geneva Conventions are part of South African law. That makes them local law. South African law is local. South Africa is local. Local. I went to pains to explain that, and I have reiterated, this would apply only in the worst case scenario, in a scenario in which there has been a total breakdown of law and order. So I don't think that anybody is going to say to us that, look, you guys drove over the speed limit last week, you've got to appear in court. We are talking specifically about a scenario, total breakdown. Secondly, thirdly or fourthly, the Geneva Conventions do not apply only to international law. International conflict. They apply to maritime conflict, non-international conflict, that is to say civil war, and international conflict. So, Scott, I'm not being funny, but I don't want your viewers to believe that I dodged an obligation to research what Philippe has said and to come back to you with some long-winded essay on YouTube during the course of the week. I don't want to respond to it because it's not making sense anymore, but if you are putting it in such a way that it looks as if I might be dodging the thing, I dealt with it.
Okay, fair enough. Now,
Philippe,
please respond. Yeah.
Thank you. Simon, what would you do if the government of the day declares that in order to preserve life and law and order in the country, declares that civilian firearms must be surrendered? And they come up to your safe area and they say, please hand in your guns for me, please. Would you obey?
That's a good question. I think that the answer is naturally no. But you have to, hold on. I think that you have to qualify the question. It depends when and under what circumstances. Obviously, because we have spoken at quite some length now, it's 20 minutes past 9 o'clock, largely about this thing of different scenarios, anarchy, different phases, and so on. So clearly it's germane here to qualify the question with under what circumstances. Has there been a breakdown of law and order? Presumably not, because you say that the government of the day comes to us. However, you say if they come to our safe area. Now, our safe area implies that there isn't a government. So, you know, I think I've explained this quite extensively a few times now.
Okay, now can we change the subject and move on? Any other questions you'd like to ask, Philippe? Because then I'd like to get to questions that people have asked by email and on the side chat here as well for Simon. Over to you, Philippe.
With what exactly?
What I was saying is, are there any other questions you want to ask Simon?
Yes, Simon, there is always, unless the government resigns en masse, there is a government. They may not be very effective, but there is a government. And if people come and collect your guns in your safe area, and you say no, and they want to take them, would you repel them by force?
We wouldn't have a safe area if there was a government, if there was an interregnum, if there was a lacuna of power, if there was a scenario in which there is anarchy, that is to say, an absence of law and order, an absence of government. I mean, this word has a specific meaning, and I described this right at the beginning of the conversation. In such a circumstance, where the international community is saying that we do not recognize the ANC as the lawful government of South Africa, we've got to send in troops, whatever. In that scenario, where they are recognizing different parties, as they did in Yugoslavia, where they said that the Croats have a legitimate right to be recognized independently, have a legitimate right to stand alone. The Slovenes, you remember the war actually started, or the trouble started with the Slovenes, not the Croats. Although the first shots were fired in Croatia. No, but I have to do this because we...
That's a very succinct question, yes or no?
Under those circumstances, where the government is not the ruler, as it were, where it is not the effective government of the region in which we find ourselves, then we most certainly will defend. No two ways about it. If they came tomorrow, that's a different scenario. If they came during our phase one, it's a different scenario. But you are conflating two different scenarios. We can't have a safe zone by law. We're not allowed to have a safe zone. We're not allowed to have a declared safe area unless the criteria for a civil war or an international conflict are met, and there are specific criteria. And I've said umpteen times tonight that if there is a civil war, if there is nationwide anarchy, if these legal criteria are being met, then we will move into a safe area. It will be the final phase of what we do. So if they're coming to a safe area, it implies that there is not a single recognized effective government. I mean, this really must, please, you know, I don't know.
All right.
No, so this will only happen if the government actually abdicates. Is that right?
The government doesn't have to
when the government of the day abdicates in total.
The Yugoslav government didn't abdicate when the international community had already recognized the rights of the Kosovars, the Albanians, the Slovenes, the Montenegrins, actually, very interestingly, and the Croats.
So what you're saying is that there is actually a government in situ, just one that you don't like and one that is not very effective at the time. And you're prepared to actually defend yourself against law enforcement that carries out the instructions of the government of the day? Wow.
No, Philippe, what we're saying is that the government doesn't have authority.
Okay, guys. Just
by virtue of the fact that the international community is now recommending or recognizing us independently, as it did with Croatia, Slovenia, etc., 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 etc.
Okay,
so we're
Simon,
waiting for instruction from the international community before you declare your final phase. Is that it?
The criteria would have to be met, yes.
Okay, now guys, look, we're getting a bit involved in this one little subject. I have so many questions that people want to ask. Now, what we'll do is we'll move to the next section of this debate, which is questions that have been emailed to me, and Simon, you can talk first, and then Philippe, if you go into response, and we'll go back to the 3-minute option. I've let this debate basically run a bit free because there's been some very, very interesting points raised, and we really appreciate that. So the first question that I got by email, which is addressed to Simon.
I'm sorry, I'm paying rapt attention to you.
Yeah.
I just want to pour myself a new glass of water off camera. I can hear every word you're saying.
Not a problem. Go ahead. So Simon, Suidlanders make an over-reliance on the protection of the Geneva Convention, and this is a question asked by Charles. Good luck with that when facing undisciplined and informal roadblocks, etc. If there is any shooting, they will immediately lose all refugee status and become belligerents under the law. What's your response to that?
That's a very good point. We recognize that very well. Charles is perfectly correct. We fully anticipate that the nature of the crisis that we envisage in South Africa will largely be dominated by numbers of irregular militia. And you may or may not know, Scott, I don't know if I did or didn't mention it to you. When I was in the USA recently, I met with some very, 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 very knowledgeable, powerful people. And they spoke to me at length about the massive influx of arms coming into South Africa. Now, our army and our police force already have more than enough arms. We have partly as a legacy of the Angolan War and the internal stabilization of South Africa, we have in places like the Aar and Jan Kempdorp and other armories across South Africa, even in places like Queenstown, we have enough arms for our soldiers and for our defense force to last forever. So any new arms being brought into South Africa from China and into neighboring countries and then into South Africa, according to these American experts, are clearly not intended for guys in your local police station. So Charles is correct. We believe that this scenario will be heavily dominated by irregular forces, and it does pose a tremendous threat. And that is why we have said on many occasions, our plan is by definition not watertight. By definition, our plan is never going to save every single person every single time. It is going to be most effective for those people who respond the most promptly. Those people who take the longest to get out, the longest to react. And by the way, there is substantial scientific research on this. Anybody who watches Ernst van den Berg's 1 hour 38-minute video will become familiar with this. There is substantial scientific research that proves that the people who leave last tend to be liberal and wealthy. It's the poor conservatives who tend to make it out first. Okay. And you can go and look up the research yourself.
Time is up. Philippe, you've got 1 minute to respond.
No. Thank you. With respect to Simon and with respect to Charles, Simon hasn't actually answered the question. Charles asked what happens when people in the columns or otherwise who are undisciplined start firing because they will now be belligerents and fall no longer under the protection of the civil defense flag. That is what he said.
What he's implying.
Hang on, Simon.
Nothing to do with Charles' question. It's very specific and to the point. What do you do when your people become belligerents because they actually start shooting?
They will be subject to the law. That's why I say there is a threat there.
There's no law.
Okay, now let's move.
Final in, there is no law anymore in Simon's version.
Okay, guys, let's move to the second question. Okay. No, look, I think we've got both perspectives tied down. Simon.
With respect.
What do you want to continue debating this one, Simon and Philippe?
Oh, Scott, I don't have the patience, man. The convoy period is a period in which there is still law. That is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of the scenario. It's not phase 6.
That wasn't Charles's question with respect. That was not his question.
Yeah, Philippe is right in that. But anyway, let's go to the second question. Okay, guys, please settle down, okay?
I'll leave it there, Scott, for the sake of progress.
Simon, Suidlanders has said they will do things which are illegal or borderline illegal, which make it legal for security forces to pursue and detain them, including into refugee areas. If they use force to protect themselves, then it is no difference to suspect armed robbers, etc., firing on the police.
Oh, Scott. Look, in phases 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the scenario, we assume that there is law. If anybody breaks that law, Charles and others, if anybody breaks that law, they will be liable to the law. In phase 6, where the criteria for an international or non-international conflict have been met, then we are entitled by law to use armed force to defend that area. It's as simple as that. In the preceding phases, we are still subject to the law. And that is a very difficult challenge to overcome, because if a bunch of poor young guys believe that it's right to attack a convoy, then you're in the very difficult scenario of choosing between your wife's welfare and going to jail, potentially. It is a dilemma.
Okay. Philippe, do you want to respond to that?
Very briefly, I don't know where that question came from, but whoever posed the question is right. If security forces present themselves as security forces, army, police, whatever, as security forces, they operate under a mantle of authority.
Yeah.
If you do not recognize that mantle of authority and you oppose them, you will be taken out. And that is all I have to say. Right. Whoever posed the question is right on the money.
That was Charles again. And Charles asked one final question. And he says, Simon, Suidlanders depend 100% on the Seine for guidance and believe that they are living out his prophecies, including that only a klein handjievol or a small handful of people will survive. They're not gearing for the survival of 150,000 members, but just a few. This is why I say this is like a doomsday cult. What do you say to that?
Well, I'd say to Charles that I presume that he came in late into the live stream, that we did mention earlier that all of our scenario planning is based upon 800,000 people. That is the number that our models have come up with on numerous occasions over years. We almost can't avoid that number. I would also put it to Charles that very few of the specialists that I meet with in Washington are believers in Sina van Rensburg, but they believe that a crisis in South Africa is now almost inevitable. As a matter of interest to Charles, those non-believers in Sina's prophecies issued a report in 1989 saying that, this was by the CIA, saying that there will be free and fair elections in South Africa, and we believe that the society is inherently fractious, and that we anticipate that within 20 years of democracy, there will be a breakdown in society. Now, we chatted to CIA people in June, I believe, of last year, June or July. And one of the questions we asked them was...
Sorry, Simon, the question was really about your reliance on those prophecies.
Yeah, but those guys don't rely on the prophecies, and they believe exactly what we believe.
Suidlanders' reliance.
Yeah. So I'm saying we're not a doomsday cult because we're planning not for a few thousand people, not even for the 150,000 number that he gave.
Yeah.
I'm saying we're planning for 800,000. Therefore, I wouldn't, describe us as a doomsday cult. And number two, I'm now using the evidence that other people depend on, which is fleshly, material evidence, the evidence of what is happening in South Africa. The world's finest experts are now saying, or did say in June of last year to us, that they no longer base their predictions upon time. In other words, they're saying that South Africa could enter a catastrophe
right
at any time. They said there was a time when we worked on 3 years, then we spoke about 6 months periods. We have now reached a point where we no longer base our predictions upon time, and they are working entirely in the flesh. And anybody who has a shred of common sense can observe what is happening in the society around them.
Sure.
They don't have to agree with us about Umsina van Rensburg or the Bible or anything else. They can see that the threat that Eskom poses, no running water, no, etc., 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 etc. So you don't have to believe what we believe. I alluded to Umsina van Rensburg to give a clear perspective on how we foresee things panning out.
Okay. Now, over to Philippe. Philippe, would you like to add some comments to that?
Yes, because Simon, in the beginning of our debate, referred that they were guided by Simon, and it would seem that he approbates and reprobates the prophecies, because Simon, as far as I know, and I know very little about him, so let's get that straight first, provides for a far lesser number than the 800,000. But I would agree that if you base your tactics and your strategy on a prophet, then you are really very, in my book, privately, very privately, then you're, in my book, no different from anybody who decides to go and sit on a mountaintop and wait for the ocean to wash his feet, which happens every year with certain cults. I have no difficulty with accepting analysis, objective analysis. I have difficulty with obscure prophecies. And I would say that anything based on obscure prophecies would be cult-like, in my view, my private personal view.
Okay.
So I would agree with Charles on that one.
Okay, now
thank you.
I actually have a question I'd like to ask, and I'm only taking one question because there are lots of people here who are asking questions. Simon, how do you stop people who see the Suidlander group as a soft target from infiltrating your messaging service and alerting criminals to block roads your groups might advertise to take when the proverbial hits the fan?
Scott, I don't want to get into prophetic stuff again, but I need to just remind you in this question, not with reference to the previous question, of the context in which I said it. I spoke specifically about the likelihood of the people not making it. Do you remember I mentioned those four things? Everything else that we have discussed has been in the flesh. Our planning with the head of the Special Forces of South Africa, former head, our planning for food and water and power and so on is all fleshly. It's all based upon common sense. It's all based upon what we know and understand of the world in which we live. That was said in a very specific context. So, when you talk about the soft target and the infiltration aspect of it, we are well aware that we are saturated by people who do not have our best intentions at heart. It is natural that a government, any government, which has under its purview an organization of a particular ethnic group preparing for a civil war, would invest tremendous state resources on monitoring their activity. And it is impossible for us to entirely circumvent that. It is likely that if people do not get out early, remember I mentioned the prophecies, the four different scenarios of people, those who are there already, those who go there, those who flee there or sprint there, and those who flee into the mouth of the lion. We believe very firmly, in these fleshly terms as well, that the people who leave last, the wealthier, more liberal people, this is scientifically proven, are going to be likely to be entrapped along the road by people who become aware of our intentions. No two ways about it.
Okay. Now, Philippe, what's your response to that?
I don't have a response. I've listened to Simon. It is basically a question only Simon can answer.
Okay.
I've heard his reply.
Okay, I'm just going to ask for the first question from the side chat now. It'll take a couple of seconds to come through. I've got Glenn monitoring the questions, so he'll post them one at a time. And okay. Sorry, guys, it takes a bit of a delay with the side chat.
That's all right.
Scott, can I have a moment with Simon, please?
Sure, absolutely. Go ahead.
Simon, do you see my hand?
I see one thumb, yes.
Yeah, I think he wants to shake hands with you.
That is more attached to it. Shake it. Okay, my Okay, my
Cool. Okay, now, Glenn's got a question here. Loving Life, please ask what happens if in Johannesburg, as it is ringed by a highway, each suburb only has 2 or 3 roads out of it with blocked and no way out. And that's a question from CH. Over to you, Simon.
It's a very, very good question. It is, we call it the Ring of Fire. And over years, you may or may not be aware, Scott, that we have what is almost certainly South Africa's leading violence and protest monitoring system. So when taxis shut down roads and so on, we plot it on a computer, and we have been doing it for years, and I don't think that there's anybody who comes even close to us. We believe very firmly that those 14 entrances, believe it or not, there are only 14 entrances and exits to the central portion of Johannesburg, that portion that CH is referring to. You would think there would be 100, but they are not. You can count them on Google Earth and see very easily. We believe that our protest monitoring system has revealed that numerous rehearsals have taken place to methodically close down the northern suburbs of Johannesburg completely, and it is one of our biggest worries.
Okay. Now, Philippe, do you want to respond to the question?
I actually have no knowledge whatsoever on the subject, so I hear Simon.
Okay.
I can't comment. I have no knowledge.
Okay. I'll just put in through to Glenn to post the next question. Side chat.
While you're doing that, perhaps I can say something helpful. It just occurred to me that your man CH may be speaking as somebody who lives in Johannesburg.
Right.
And now he's fretting more than he was after listening to my explanation. We all have family members in Johannesburg. I have 3 sons in Johannesburg. I lie awake at night over this. The only potential solution is to leave as early as possible, to enter into a phase 1 where you're still in the town, and to be prepared to go into a phase 2 as rapidly as possible. You may be one of those people who can't take time off work and has to go into work every day, even though you're overnighting 20 kilometers out of town. This is a very, very fluid, very difficult thing to manage. That's why we have to approach it so very, very scientifically. And we have all of these phases to manage the situation as well as we possibly can. So for whatever it is worth to CH, if there does seem to be a threat, if he does hear rumors that the Suidlanders guys of certain groups or certain provinces around Johannesburg are moving out, he should try to fit in as far as possible into that solution. Meet them in the middle of the town. Size up the problem. Go 10 kilometers out of town. Drive out of the Ring of Fire. You know, just get over the end to the western bypass, or go to the Visvangplek 60 kilometers away and come into work every day if you feel that is the appropriate solution for you. But there is a mess of possible permutations in this. There really is an answer for everything. It doesn't mean that there's an answer for every scenario at once, but we have examined every possible threat.
Okay, now this is one posted, Philippe. Rob asked, with all these concerns, what alternative do you suggest?
ideally speaking, get out of Dutch, leave the country, because then you don't have any of these problems. In fact, you should really have left if you have skills or you have qualifications or you are an artisan. You shouldn't have waited for this to happen. This has been in the making for a very, very long time. That would be my first advice to you, so that you can live in an environment where you're safe, where you're respected, where you're not subject to a rogue government, because that's what the ANC is. It is corrupt, it is rogue, it is above the law.
Yeah.
They are unchallenged in this regard. I would swap that for a country where your government is accountable, where you are welcome, where you are respected, and where you are safe. Secondly, my point is that if you do have to stay for some reason, not all of us can leave and make a new life.
That's what people are saying.
Okay, if that is the case, then I would revert to a private arrangement out of town with a farmer if you can, and ride it out. If you can't do that, perhaps set up some sort of a prepper group. You don't really have a choice, then it's an escalation situation. I still have serious difficulties with the size of Simon's organization. I don't have difficulties with the choice of getting out of town. So that may be the option that he has, but I would confine it to a very small scale operation if possible.
Yeah. Okay. So you reckon the size could be the issue? Over to you, Simon. What are your views?
On what is the solution? Well, the question was directed at Philippe. I think that it was implied in the question that
but do you want to add to
which we discussed at length?
Do you want to add to what Philippe said?
Well, look, not everybody can leave the country, and those that remain have to have a solution here. So let's leave aside that part because it doesn't pertain to us. We are for the people who are remaining. As far as small groups of preppers on small farms are concerned, our group-based structure means that people are not congregating in a million in the same place. If there are 10 people in this house and 10 people in the next house and 10 people in the house down the street, you can't very well say that there is a group of 100 people in my house. By definition, there is not.
Right.
You know, the small numbers add up to large numbers, providing that they're on the same sheet of paper in the mathematics test. If they're on different sheets of paper, we assume they're different sums. So we have bent over backwards to ensure that our people are not 1 million people swamping, for example, Bloemfontein. However, I will say this, and of course there's a nuance here, and people may not readily agree, but there is safety in numbers in the scenario which we anticipate. So 2 or 6 or 9 people on a farm are not likely going to be defensible against the overwhelming masses that will be hungry in a catastrophic scenario in South Africa.
Yeah.
There will be tens of millions that are hungry, not hundreds of thousands. So it is better to have 50 or 100 people on a farm. That's a sensible number. Right. People who can defend a reasonable tract of land, not 3 or 6 or 9, but also not 100,000 in the town of Schweizerenike or whatever. You know, really, it will be beneficial to people to read our handleiding, to send an email to hk@suidlanders.co.za, or to take a look at the video that will be available publicly for 1 week only, that you have, whose link you have posted.
Yeah, that'll be there. Now, Jacko has asked. Sorry, Philippe.
Scott, if I may.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I have a very brief comment. Could I?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. My experience was with a particularly large group, 328 in fact, taking small holdings many years ago in the Deep Sloot squatter camp, and very few people held them back. So you don't need huge masses. But my main misgiving is that if you have 50 people or 100 people defending a farm, that includes women, children, the old, and infirm, unless I'm wrong. So if you get down to how many actual people you have defending people, the farm or the area, it might be a relatively small number, but those other people are actually very vulnerable. And you will not get millions of people attacking one farm. You might get a group of 10, 20. In our case, it was a group, we videoed them, of 328 at the time. That was the largest group we've ever seen. But you won't get thousands. You will get a small group of people. But the vulnerable people that you have within your structure, they are the ones that I worry about. Thank you.
Well, this is why it's so vital for people to familiarize ourselves thoroughly with the plan before interrogating it overly, because it is a very elaborate, sophisticated plan. And the more you read, the more you appreciate that many different scenarios have been taken into account, such as the legal circumstances at that time, such as the intensity of the conflict. As a matter of interest to you, I'm digressing slightly, but we work on 1 in 6 people being an able-bodied man fit for defending a perimeter line. And that's more or less an international norm.
Right.
I say more or less, advisedly. About between 18 and 23% of the average population, obviously it varies, some populations are younger than others. We know that places like Japan and Italy have aging populations. But on average,
okay,
between 18 and 23% of a standard average population are able-bodied men fit for some sort of a frontline duty. So that's 1 in 5.
Okay.
If you take it as 20%, between 18 and 23, 20%. We say we work on 1 in 6 in the spirit of caution,
right?
In the spirit of common sense.
I have a question on just that aspect, Scott, may I?
Yeah, go ahead, Philippe.
Simon, I hear you, and I hear your ratio. What is your position if the government of the day, the authorities, declare during phase 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever you wish, that firearms must not be carried in public to prevent greater ill in the community? They're very likely to do this. I remember that from my police time. What would be your position on that? Then you would not have armed people around. What would you do?
It's a very challenging scenario.
Yes.
The increased stringency of the Firearms Act is something that is perturbing to everybody who is concerned about the future. The frantic scurrying to enact a revised state of emergency, as we all know has been happening in government since December 2016, is again a source of great concern to us. We recognize these things. We recognize the threat. Do we have some sort of magical solution to circumvent it? No. It's going to be dictated by common sense and people's own recognizance. Many men are going to say in a convoy, for argument's sake, and now I'm not saying that this is foolproof. I am saying that there are many people who will say, under no circumstances are we giving up our firearms. And you may ridicule that. That's fine. But this is a reality, whether you or Scott or anybody else likes it or not. It is a reality that in a time of threat, there may still be a government in power. It may be early in these phases. The government may be telling the world, oh, don't worry, you know, there have only been 10,000 people killed over the past 2 weeks. We've got it under control. And the international community, given that South Africa, the Rainbow Nation, the new South Africa, Simunia, we are one, is the darling of the world. The international community may very well back South Africa, the South African government or the ANC government up in that scenario. This is a threat, and we know it. Now, I want to add one thing. When I was last in the USA, I met a man who is the most high-profile person in the world in his field, and that is the field of civil war. And he said to me that every criterion for a civil war has already been met. So that is to say, imagine it's a 100 meters race, you're only at 60 meters. He's not saying that you're already across the finish line. He's saying you are already running down the track. You've got your shoes on, you've done your warm-ups, the starter pistol has gone bang. So his point is that now it's only a matter of time. And he said to me, whatever you do, no matter what happens, no matter what they do with the law, don't give up your firearms. Now, clearly, he's implying something illegal. He's a very compassionate man. He has adoptive non-white children. He's not a conservative. He's not pro-white. He's not a white supremacist. He has two adopted black children. He's a liberal man, but he's a scientist. And speaking as a scientist, he said to me, no matter what happens in your country, if they change the firearms law or if they implement a state of emergency, I am telling you that a civil war in your society is now inevitable. I'm speaking as a scientist, or every criterion has already been fulfilled. It's now just a matter of time.
Now,
speaking
Simon,
as a liberal.
Simon, just to add to what you've just said, there's an RT documentary coming out tomorrow, Monday, in which you're participating, and in the teaser, it has you saying a civil war in South Africa is inevitable. Now, I want to get on to the next question. Jarko has asked, with a refugee situation, and this is a really interesting question, after the shit hits the fan on all the farms and refugee camps, how is law and order going to be maintained under the general refugee population?
There is another document which he's welcome to request from the same source. He should just make it clear that who he is. I'll remember. My secretary will ask me. She'll be baffled, although she'll be watching this, so maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But I will send him that document, which addresses this thing of the safety and security in the camps. We have 5 key departments that we are building now, day by day by day. I told you about our communication capacity stretching right across South Africa. Yep. We have many tons of medicine, etc., etc. Now, pertaining to the one department which we call security, this is not a defense department, it is internal security. It's what you might call policing and prosecution and so on. We have highly advanced structures in place for that exact eventuality, because it's inevitable that hungry people who arrive unprepared, perhaps terribly traumatized, will be inclined to seek out conflict, to obtain food and so on, with people who arrive prepared. So we will, one of our key things is to split people who have preparations and those who don't have preparations, so that the one lot can look after themselves,
right,
but be isolated from the threat of those whose children are screaming blue murder with hunger. And then the other group of people we will obviously prepare for, we are prepared to sustain with clean water and shelter and food and so on from the farms that they will be on. But there's no two ways. It's a very good question indeed. There will be a threat, it will be a challenge, but we have a department and structures and policies and procedures in place in anticipation of that.
Okay, fantastic. Now I've got another. Sorry, Philippe, do you want to respond to that?
No, okay. I hear what he says.
Okay. Okay, we have another couple of questions. They're coming through thick and fast. Let me just find them. Okay. Daxon to Rule, question for Simon. Do your members each have a detailed knowledge of the skills of others in their group? Who knows medicine, who knows comms, etc.?
Yes, some groups are stronger than others and some are weak. We have the necessary policies and manuals and what have you. For example, we have a massive manual that provides guidelines for logistics, for example. And that logistics department is headed by a former SA NDF colonel who until recently was doing contract work in Iraq and Afghanistan for variously the USA, NATO and the British. In fact, as a matter of interest, he falsified his oh no, I shouldn't say this, but anyway, for many years he has been regarded as arguably the leader in that field in the whole world. He has a tremendous reputation. So we do have very strong guidelines.
Okay.
But some groups are weaker, some are stronger. In some groups, you will find that people have made zero progress, and that's their own fault. It's not they didn't have guidelines.
Yeah.
In other groups, again, you will find that the guys are on the money. They've got a dedicated security person, a convoy leader, a radio specialist, or 8 or 20 radio specialists, and so on and so forth.
Right. Philippe, do you want to respond?
Yes. I was actually taken aback a bit by Simon's statement that you have many tons of medicines. How is that covered? Because that is very strictly regulated. Are you guys doing your own thing there with prescription medication and restricted medication?
No, we are too vulnerable, Philippe. We're too vulnerable to prosecution because of the elevated interest that the government has in our organizations. We are naturally, I mean, it's only natural, saturated by agents of the state. So everything we have to do is legal, and if we don't, we'll be shut down tomorrow. So in terms of the regulated medicines, no, the many tons to which I alluded does not include regulated medicines. It includes, well, the things that you can buy off the shelf. A lot of bandages, a lot of burn dressings, a lot of these vehicle-based medical kits, a lot of common pain medicines, a lot of syringes and needles, and syringe needles, and suturing needles and suturing kits that you can buy perfectly legally from pharmacies.
Do you guys have field hospitals that you equip in your safe areas?
We do. We don't have many. We have a few. In fact, yesterday, one of our groups very proudly announced on one of our WhatsApp groups, that is to say, one of our regional groups, announced on our WhatsApp group, you know, where the regions kind of compete against each other, that they have a new field ambulance, and that was lovely to see. But I should perhaps mention to you, Philippe, that it is our intention in moving into these safe areas to take over anything that we can take over legally. Now, if we declare a safe zone in terms of international law, and Ernst van den Berg, our young genius, talks extensively about this in the video, then we are perfectly entitled to say, right, we're going to appropriate this hospital for our use. It doesn't mean that we tie up every loose end. It doesn't mean that we have a watertight, foolproof solution. It does mean that we have given it considerable thought and planning, and that we will do our damnedest to implement it as well as humanly possible. And that the same applies to water treatment plants and sewerage plants and telephone junctions and railway sidings and silos, etc., etc.
Simon, with respect, you can't actually commandeer anything. It's illegal. It is not yours to commandeer. It's as simple as that. If the criteria of international law have been met, we will commandeer it.
Okay, now let's move on, because we've covered this position in the past, so we'll move on. Now, Nigel Soden has asked, how does Simon propose to repel an army that have tanks and heavy armored vehicles?
Nigel Soden, did you say?
Yeah.
Nigel, that is a detail into which I'd rather not go, and can anticipate your frustration in me avoiding this question, but I must avoid it.
Okay, so obviously there's something there. Philippe, do you want to respond?
I think the question is right on the money, particularly if Simon starts and his group starts commandeering public assets. You end up in a lot of trouble with that. Also, if there is a general rule from a sitting government, if the government hasn't abdicated, they couldn't give two shoots about what Europe or anybody else says.
Okay.
If they resist, they will meet fully automatic firearms. They will meet armored cars. They will meet 50 cals, they will meet 20 millimeter, 30 millimeter guns, and you have no chance. If your guys run into a roadblock, which is manned by armored cars, and has 30 cal machine guns in it, and there is a directive that you should not be in possession of firearms, and people resist an instruction to hand them in, that convoy will be blasted from front to back.
Well,
it will be over
in
before
that
it's
case, in that
no
case,
choice.
you are correct. In that case, I must concede the point. You and Boerelegioen are perfectly correct. The answer is to drink out of your swimming pool for 3 months with no electricity.
Okay, now let's move on to the next question. And Harry Farmer's asked a serious question here. Why do people think it will all end well? And he says, please don't say, with respect, Sina said.
No, on the contrary, Sina van Rensburg gave a terrifying scenario. He said the very, very contrary. He said it would end very badly. We think that it will, or how can I put this? He said that it would be a terrible scenario in which very few people survive. But we would like to be among those few people. And I think that's the best that I can say. If we use our minds and we prepare well and we train hard and we enlist as much support as possible, then we will be amongst those people who stand the best chance of seeing their children through to the other end.
Okay, Philippe, what would you have to say to that?
I think any civil war ends badly for everybody. There are no winners in this situation. And the only question is, how does one limit the damage, and how does one support the reconstruction of a country? And I take it, but I'm not sure, I can't put words into your mouth. Is your settlement in the safe area permanent, or do you want to return back to your original homes and try and resurrect the country? What is the situation there? Because that is how it will end.
That's a very good question. Depending upon the length of the crisis, we will certainly endeavour to make the settlement in the safe area or the society as sustainable and indefinitely feasible as possible. So there's a yes to that. There is also a yes to, so it's not really an either or question as we see it. There is also a yes to the second part of your question. We would wish to go back to our homes and to live in peace ad infinitum. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yes. Question answered. Scott?
Scott? I don't know, it looks like it's just you and me left.
Oh man. I don't think they'll let us off that easily, Simon.
Well, I see that Scott's icon is still present on my screen, meaning that we are theoretically connected to him. So it may be that he's pressed the mute button, or that his audio is not coming through, but the internet believes that we are still connected to Scott by Skype.
Mine failed a little while ago, but it reconnected again. It was maybe half a minute, and then it jumped back in.
Yes. I don't know. Let's give him a chance. Perhaps he'd like to disconnect and redial, Philippe. I don't know. I'm happy to be patient if you are.
Well, of course, yeah.
Sorry, guys. I just had to go to the little boys' room.
Okay. You're forgiven.
You got to go sooner or later, haven't you? No.
You missed the rare incident this evening that we were not fighting.
Well, that's what debates are about, isn't it? Now, a question to Simon, and this is from Ben Hassan. Sina said we will fight differently to how we fought in the Boer War. Any idea what he meant by it? No need to answer if it gives away strategy plans.
Yeah, man, Scott, it's not the kind of question that I can answer enough to satisfy him. You know, anything I'm going to say is sensitive, not because it's illegal. We are preparing to defend a safe zone stipulated by international law once the criteria are met. There's no illegal proposition whatsoever. However, I would rather not elaborate on the details of that, and I think the reasons are obvious, you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm just waiting for the next...
Let it suffice to say, I beg your pardon, Scott, I'm trying to be helpful, I apologize.
Yeah.
Let it suffice to say that we are not ill-prepared. We are not without support. We do not lack massive amounts of knowledge, skills, and experience from the right people. I'm not talking about me.
All right.
I'm not talking about senior leaders of Suidlanders or the lady who keeps, who does the administration for us, or our bookkeeper. I'm talking about the right people. That's as much as I can say.
Okay. Philippe, do you want to respond?
May it never come to that. May it never come to that.
Okay, now...
May we all live happily ever after in the Rainbow Nation, you know what I mean?
Donda has asked, Simon, what if the farms are taken away by that time?
Now, that's a very, very worthwhile point. Again, it's a difficult question to answer. It's a highly intelligent question, but it's a bit like the Firearms Act. What if they implement the new revision of the Firearms Act and take away all firearms that were intended for self-defense? The what if is simple.
Yeah.
Either you hang on to your firearm illegally or you give it over. It's, you know, what if a state of emergency is implemented the day after tomorrow, and they impose a curfew from 6 p.m. at night to 6 a.m. in the morning. It will present a massive challenge. And if the farms are taken away, then we're going to have to move much of our advanced preparations to non-farming places, which exist, many of them. So I don't think there's a very clever answer to that. It's a dilemma, it's a conundrum, it's a puzzle, it's a challenge that we will have to address as and when these things happen, whether it is a matter of a curfew or the government taking away all firearms for self-defense, Scott.
Okay, fantastic. Now, John has asked, is Orania a separate state from South Africa?
No, Orania is not a separate state. I'm not qualified to speak on Orania. I would be speaking out of turn. If anybody sends me an email to hk@suidlanders.co.za, I can refer them to somebody in Orania. They have highly intelligent people there whom we know quite well. We have no formal association with them. Our policies are widely divergent. We believe in very, very different ideals and philosophies, but they are in close proximity to us. It's 65 kilometers from where the majority of our leadership is based here in Van der Kloof on the Orange River. So naturally there's some sort of osmosis. Naturally we have a lot from time to time to do with them, to chat and so on. And I can say on that basis, and only that basis, that Orania is a town which was granted to the Afrikaner Boervolk as a place which could be owned by a particular organization. It's called the Orania Beweging.
Yeah.
And where they could control the entry of people based upon culture. In other words, that they were permitted to establish this little oasis and to say, right, this is all private property. You can't own the property. It's privately owned. And in terms of that private ownership by the Orania Beweging, you may obtain a 99-year lease, I think it is.
Yeah.
And in terms of the special dispensation given by the government through the negotiations that occurred prior to 1994, we restrict the participation in this scheme to people of the same language, history, culture, traditions as we are.
Right. Now, Philippe, do you want to add to anything or respond to that?
Scott, I can hear you, but his picture has frozen, so
yeah,
I think he has a little break in connection.
Yeah, okay, look, I'll go to the next question. Oh, it's to Philippe. Hang on, let's just see if I can get Philippe back. I think it's just let me just see. I'll just get another question to you, Simon, in the meantime. We can just wait for Philippe to get back to us. Okay, another question here from Leon. Suidlanders claim to have intelligence, so if there is no infrastructure in place to make use of their intelligence and provide pre-warnings of backup or support to at least reduce the number of whites currently being attacked and killed.
Scott, I'm not sure that I understand the question. Did you grasp it? Can you
I think what he's talking about, hang on, let me just see if I can get Philippe back. Okay, I'm just trying to get Philippe back in. I think what he's talking about is, do you have intelligence which alerts you to what is going on in South Africa and where it's going?
Yeah, most certainly. Yeah, very much so. We have very many extraordinarily good contacts in the government, in the armed forces,
right,
in the South African police, and these guys have their fingers very much on the pulse of what is happening in South Africa. I think I mentioned to you previously, Scott, in our last long conversation, that we have on a couple of occasions recently been asked by our government, the South African government, to meet with them to address their concerns.
Right.
And the mere fact that the government wants to talk to us about the potential for a crisis and are admitting many threats tells you that the government is very concerned, and they believe that there is real, actual potential for a civil war in South Africa. Not because we say so, because that's what their intelligence is telling them. And so we're dealing with those people, we're dealing with other people, the insiders and so on. Yes,
right.
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm just trying to get Philippe back. I'm just going to try that again. Okay, there we go. Right. Now, just talking on that particular issue, when we talk about things like that, do you believe there is a white genocide happening right now?
So, genocide has a very particular meaning. It's like suicide, matricide, fratricide, etc. It's the extermination of a people. Is there a white genocide happening in the sense that it has been successful and that we are dying out faster than we can reproduce? No, not in that sense. Is there a methodical, sustained program that is government-sponsored, largely government-sponsored,
right,
to drive white farmers off the land? Yes, and anybody who watches Dr. Gregory Stanton's 12-minute soliloquy on this subject, given in 2012 at the Transvaal Agricultural Union building hall in 2012, as I say, will understand why we say this. He is the leading expert on genocide, not civil war, but genocide in the world. And he gave a very intelligent answer as to why he, as a liberal, former anti-apartheid activist, is positive that there is a methodical program that is government-sponsored to drive white farmers off the land.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'm just trying to get Philippe back online. Let me just give it one more go. I've just asked if there are any final questions, because I know it's getting very late for you. I think we've had a really good debate, and I think it's answered a lot of questions for people. And let's just see if Philippe is able to get back. Okay. Now, people are saying there's a bit of an echo from your side, but this is so late in the live stream that I'm not too concerned about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I can do. I'm going to open a door just in case it's reverberating off the walls.
Yeah.
That may help. Let's try.
Okay. All right, guys. Are there any final questions that you want to ask? Moira, what is your question? I'm sorry, but there are thousands of IMs in here. You repeat your question, and I will ask it. Okay. I'm just waiting for Moira. She said she's had a question which has not been responded to.
Okay. I think there was a lady called Moira who asked the question on the previous live stream, Scott. Perhaps it's the same lady.
No,
I don't know.
Yeah. Boer and Brewer says, can people start migrating to safe places already?
It is already happening. I'll illustrate this way. When I first came to Van der Kloof, the village in which the majority of our senior leadership lives, in 2015, you could rent a 3-bedroom house. You can see the panels over my shoulders, these asbestos houses that were built like Oranje, exactly the same for the buildings of Gary Dam and Van der Kloof Dam and the canals and so on. You could rent one of those houses, 3-bedroom house, nice little house, for R1,000 a month. I don't think you can get one for under 4,000 Rand anymore. And in fact, I know that right now, as of today in Van der Kloof, there are no houses to rent whatsoever. However, there are many houses to buy because people who bought houses in this region, be it Van der Kloof, Jacobsdal, Jagersfontein, Poplar Grove, Hopetown, Oranje, and so on, who bought houses in this region 10 years ago basically for free, due to the demand, are now making a killing over those houses for 500,000 Rand, 750 a million, and more. So that's indicative of the migration to this region and the regions nearby for this exact reason. In fact, I was told, I don't know this, I didn't experience it firsthand, but I was told that the prices in Prieska, which features very heavily in Sina van Rensburg's prophecies, or whatever that is worth to your viewers, the prices in Prieska are more ludicrous than they are here.
Okay, now let's move on to the next. Now, this is Moira's question. Moira, you see, I haven't forgotten you. I'm just sorry. There's so many IMs coming through. Okay, this is directed to Simon. Simon, firstly, are you a Freemason? And secondly, when are you looking to go to the USA, and what is the main objective? Is it looking for more finance?
No, I'm not a Freemason.
Hang on, I'm just going to contact Philippe, trying to connect with you.
So should I keep talking?
Yeah, just keep talking, yeah.
Okay, I'm not a Freemason. I am going to the USA in a few weeks' time, and the purpose is twofold. Firstly, to give a speech that I've been invited to give at a conference, and secondly, to meet with certain people in Washington, D.C. The funding thing we've kind of given up on, Moira. We tried hard to raise funds for a long time, and we were consistently unsuccessful. What we did get is a little stream of donations from conservative Americans, but it was never large sums of money.
Right.
It never made a meaningful difference to our financial circumstances, and I don't know where else to look next.
Right.
So I, for one, have kind of given up trying to raise substantial amounts of money.
Oh, fantastic. Philippe's got back again. Hi, Philippe. We lost you for a while there.
I've been battling to try and get through to you guys, but the internet connection was too weak and it just bombed out.
Well, as I said to Simon, I think we had a really productive debate, and I think you guys have done a really great job. Now, Okay, it's getting late for the folk in South Africa. It's about 10:30 in the evening, and Monday they've got to go to work. And okay, CH has asked, Simon asked, has he had any hint from that another country or people will help white South Africa?
Yes.
Okay.
I can't say more than that, Scott. I mean, now we're verging on very, very, very dangerous territory. Do we have a state sponsor? Is there a particular country in the world that is saying, we back the white, radical, racist Suidlanders? No, they're saying the contrary in terms of states. South Africa, Simonia, we are one, remains the darling of the world. We don't have a state sponsor by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
Not in the USA, not nowhere, not Donald Trump. It's nonsense. Don't believe it. It's rubbish. But there are certain incredibly powerful and influential people in the world who have our best interests at heart and who would not intervene militarily. It's not like, some dude has aircraft carriers parked in the yacht mall, Bill Gates or something like that. There's no such thing, but we do have support from people who have more power and influence than you can almost imagine.
Okay. Now, Philippe, would you like to respond to that question?
Yeah, I have a comment there if I may. If I may.
Yeah.
We had an interesting incident here, Simon, and listeners, yours. Mr. Ramaphosa was on an official visit to the UK, and he discussed expropriation of white-owned property without compensation with Theresa May, who is not going to be our PM for very much longer, our Prime Minister for very much longer. She is gone, pretty much. She actually gave him 90 million for the privilege, pounds.
Yes. Yes.
But that's not it. What really puzzles me is that Mrs. May did not bother to find out if any of those farms and properties that are to be expropriated without compensation might belong to British subjects.
I don't think she can.
It's not her job to actually protect those British subjects. That didn't occur to her, and so this whole exercise with expropriation without compensation involving whites is de facto United Kingdom approved, which is really very sick. Yeah.
You must bear in mind, Philippe, I'm going to choose my words carefully here, and if you feel that the vagueness of what I have to say is frustrating, then I could understand that, but I'm obviously not in a position to elaborate very much. But having spoken to politicians around the world, I have been warned more than once that they are not in a position to be outspoken about South Africa, including that chap I told you about who is the world's leading specialist in civil war. He said, I cannot say anything publicly. The zeitgeist, the spirit of the times is such that you cannot say anything negative about South Africa, but we are not stupid. We know what's actually happening in South Africa. And he said what will have to transpire, and this was echoed by other people, is that when the crisis occurs, we're going to have to let it evolve so far, as they did in Yugoslavia, the international community, and as they did in Rwanda, to the point where later on we will be criticized for having been negligent and careless and not having discharged our responsibilities and what have you. But he said it's the only way to get around this thing. We have to wait until the point where the mood shifts in the rest of the world and it becomes fashionable to care about white women being raped and the flames being put out on the backs of little girls in a civil war scenario. He's talking particularly about a civil war, an anarchic scenario. where government is dubious and debatable and doubtful and so on and so forth. He said, when it is too late for you, we will then be able to take action. He said, you're not going to be pleased with us. You're going to feel that we betrayed you. But he said, that is our reality. The man of the world has rammed down the throats of the rest of the Western world for 40 years now. That Nelson Mandela and the blacks of South Africa are good, and that the whites and apartheid are inherently bad, and that you guys deserve what is coming to you. And he said we have to wait for that to change.
Now, Philippe, do you want to respond to that?
No, it's actually a very sad position and a very unbecoming one. I regret that she has done this on behalf of the British government and, in fact, on behalf of the British
taxpayer.
people.
Now,
that was a bad decision. But she made a few. She made a few, which is why she's gone now.
Yeah. Now,
it might be the light in the tunnel. You might get someone with some hair on his chest who will take the proper position.
Now, a fellow that you know, Philippe, Dwayne, has asked, Helgard asks, how much blood must flow from the white nation before we do something about it? And that's quite related to this topic that we've just been talking about.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I don't know how much is enough, 1 litre or a million litres, so I'm going to hold my peace. I think I've sketched the scenario as comprehensively as I can.
But Philippe?
I think that the question is, with respect, slightly incomplete. The whites will not be the only ones who will bleed.
Right.
The problem is that when these things break loose in South Africa, the worst violence, the worst bloody violence that broke out in South Africa was actually after 1994, when the black factions, ANC, IFP, jostled for position and for power. Most of the deaths that occurred among the black people occurred then, not during apartheid.
Yeah.
And it is my view and my experience that when they break loose, they will turn on each other first before they turn on us.
I totally agree.
That will be a very sad situation as well, because a lot of South African black people do not wish any violence between us and them. They don't wish violence between anybody and anybody.
Yeah.
They simply want to raise their kids.
Yeah.
They want to have a reasonable standard of living and security like any other parent and any other decent person wishes.
Sure.
It's the violent factions that actually want to ignite the fuse, want to light the fuse.
Yeah.
And that is not the majority. We may well find that we have allies from very unexpected quarters. And they may well be the quarters of intelligent, decent black people who say this cannot go on, this may not happen, because all of us will go down the hole.
Yeah.
And the few, like the Malemas and the Black Land First crowd, may well find themselves at the sharp end of the stick. I think that a lot of black people, and that is your question regarding the new Firearms Act, the guys who really opposed it most vociferously were the black gun owners associations. They are with us on that one. Yeah. Not everybody hates whites. There is a percentage that is vocal and very nasty. But the great majority that I know, I've got quite a few black patients, they had no truck with some whatsoever.
Yeah.
And they have no hatred against us. And they know that if we leave en masse, South Africa doesn't have a future. And they wish the future for themselves, for their children. I think that we may well find that black blood, the black people will bleed as much, if not more so than we do, before it gets to us. And that would be a very, very sad event. Very sad. And sadly, it is actually still avoidable, which I hope it is. I hope that this government gets an uncontrollable attack of common sense. and decency, and that it may benefit all of us, and nobody bleeds.
Yeah. Now, Simon, do you want to add to that?
Well, I just wanted to say to Philippe, not in a spirit of hostility or combat, honestly, I don't mean to be antagonistic at all. But I can't help asking him, does he believe that that is remotely realistic? And before you answer, Philippe, what you're implying, if I may say so, is that the ANC will become inherently a force for good, dominated at the senior levels by good people, and that there's a complete change of heart of the ANC as the governing force in South Africa. Do you think that there's any realistic chance of that?
I think it is actually the reverse. I think that the top of the ANC will remain as corrupt as it has ever been, and they've got another 5 years to perfect that. I think that the goodwill comes from the rank and file citizens. I think that a lot of goodwill exists among the middle class and poorer black people. They see what's happened. They don't have the quality of life that was promised them. They've seen all the services go down the drain. They are the recipients of very poor medical services, education, job opportunities, universities that are dumped down, universities that are not teaching, they spend a lot of money sending their kids to it, and it's not meeting expectation. I think that the top of the ANC will remain what it is. I don't hold any hope that they as I said, get an uncontrollable attack of decency. But I think that the pressure is going to come from lower down, because they're actually pretty much in the same boat that we are in. And they realize also that if farms are expropriated, that they are going to be the ones starving.
Yeah.
And that if Eskom goes any further down the chute, that they are going to be out of the job. Not public servants who are on all sorts of perks and jobs for booties, but the rank and file, black, coloured, white persons are actually all in the same boat. And they're all victims of this government. And they know it, and they see it, and I hear it.
Yeah.
I don't expect any relief from the top whatsoever. Probably worse than we ever had.
Well, you know, we have a term on the...
More pressure from below than we can ever exert.
Yeah,
that is my hope.
We have a term on the Loving Life channel, and that is that black privilege equates to parasites. They're feeding off a carcass. Now, sorry, over to you, Simon. Do you want to...
Well, I would disagree stridently with Philippe, because the recent elections have proven that the ANC hasn't lost a significant amount of support. It's 1% or 2%, and that the EFF has gained tremendous support, and that the DA has lost support. So, if anything, I'm not being funny, but I'm beyond the point where I believe this thing of, you know, with respect, I'm not being disrespectful, when I hear from people, which I do, I mean, you can imagine, in my position, I've been listening to this every day of my life. When I was living in Johannesburg, before I went over there, now the same thing. Ooh, I speak to a lot of black people, you know. Ooh, and they're very unhappy. Bullshit! If they were, the voting patterns would change. The problem is that the system of patronage that the ANC works through, the ANC is a representative democracy. It's not a democracy as such. So you belong to a ward or a street committee, you vote for a representative, and they have their national elective conferences. We just had the 54th one a couple of years ago. The 52nd one was the one in which Jacob Zuma gets elected. Those people arrive at those conferences, and they are mandated by their groups, their regions, or whatever, their wards, or their regions to vote in a certain way. About 5,000 people participate. About 5,500 in the conference, of which about 5,000 have voting rights. And those people derive benefit, immediate financial benefit, from participating in the corruption. So the entire top structure, I'm not talking about the top 6 or the NEC, which is 108 people. I'm talking about all of the people whose votes really count are not going to change. I'm also talking about the people in the municipalities and the regional governments, that is to say the provincial governments and the national government, the functionaries, the technocrats, the bureaucrats, the people in the union buildings, the people in the parliament. They also derive benefit through the system of patronage, and Helen Ziller has spoken very eloquently about this recently. So, on the one hand, the ANC membership, talking about members, the wards up to the 5,000, to the 108, to the 6, that is not going to change. Custody. My dog is alarmed by something. It's not going to change. And secondly, the man on the street is not going to change. The DA, let's say the right wing, has lost power, not gained. The ANC has lost marginally, but the EFF has increased drastically. Far from this phenomenon that people speak about so extensively, and I say it with respect, Philippe, please don't take me the wrong way. I say this in humility and with respect, but I feel that I'm entitled to be vociferous and vehement and adamant about this thing because everybody's talking about it. Every second white person you meet tells you how they're made, and their gardener, and the guy at the factory, and the driver, and this guy, and that guy, and the next guy. They can see the problems. More dust. They would have voted differently. They wouldn't have voted more left-wing. They think expropriation without compensation is the answer. That's why the EFF support increased. And it's why the ANC's changed so very little. Our society is becoming more radicalized towards this communist insanity than that it is shifting away from it because it's seeing that it's not working. My water's not running. Oh dear me, I'm going to vote for the phrase front or the EFF or whatever. I mean the DA. It's not the case, guys.
Okay.
Scientifically, it's not the case.
I have a question for both of you. Okay, now Anna-Rees asked, Philippe, do you think the army and police will be orderly and disciplined when the shit hits the fan? And Layli asked Simon, if we know it is a matter of time, why wait till it is too late? Why not jump ship now and grow a fleet or something similar to a passive civilian strike on all the roads on the country? Now, I'll ask Philippe to answer first.
I don't think so. Unfortunately, I don't think so. The old defense force was one of the most disciplined defense forces in the world. Also one of the most competent ones, and I would hate to ever face them from the wrong end of a barrel. They were highly disciplined, skilled, and generally very intelligent. If you see demonstrations or performances of the current defense force, I mean, have a look at what happened when they had their day on the beach where they were showcasing their prowess. What a complete and utter snafu that was. It was insane, but I think it is pretty much representative of what and who they are. I don't believe for a minute that they will obey orders. I think they may well take part in looting. I don't think they will be very controlled at all. Remember that these guys were kicked out of the Congo where they were peacekeeping forces because of all the rapes that were taking place and the abuse of children and the corruption that they introduced. They were actually run out by the United Nations out of the Congo and become here. So I hold out no hope. I was trained by very, very professional policemen who took pride in their job at the time. Call them what you will, yes, they served during the apartheid regime, but they were by and large very honest. They were not corrupt. They were knowledgeable, they were professional, and they had guts, and they actually served people. The current bunch, the current crop, and that goes right down from the top. I mean, look at Philippe. Philippe was a general who was elected to head Interpol as the first black chair of Interpol from South Africa. And black Interpol chair ever. the first thing the bugger did was actually sell mafia files, secret Interpol mafia files, to the mafiosi in Cape Town for a good amount of money. They kept him going. And virtually every commissioner we've had since has left under a cloud. The guys who ran the arms registry have been fired one after another because of either incompetence or corruption or both. There have been political appointees at station level, at district level, and everybody is a colonel in general. When you deal with these people, you actually wonder if they even pass matric. They are hopeless. There is still a nucleus of old-style policemen, old-school policemen, whether they were trained after 94 or before, who still have that calling and the integrity and that calling to serve. They exist, they are there, and there are a good few of them as well. But by and large, I wouldn't put my money on any of it, not on the army, not on the police, not what I've seen. It is not what it used to be. And okay. I don't trust either side of it. Does it help?
Okay. Now, Simon, what are your views?
I have nothing useful to add to what Philippe has just said. He's perfectly correct.
Okay, now, the question targeted at you?
Would you mind repeating it, Scott?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask that. I've lost it. Can the person who asked that question that I read out repeat it?
I was paying attention to the...
Oh my gosh. Let me see if I can track it down. There are thousands of IMs in here, so you've got to... Okay. Gee. New World Order says, I'd love to marry a South African girl.
You know, that's a big thing, huh? When I travel in Europe and the USA, the young right-wing guys,
yeah.
Oh, they're fascinated by the idea of coming out here and meeting a nice Afrikaans girl. And indeed, one or two have, just by the way.
Well,
which is not a good thing.
I know of one person on my YouTube channel who's met a very nice Afrikaans lady, which is lovely. I'm not going to say names, but... All right. I've lost that question. All right, guys. Look, it's nearly 11 p.m. in South Africa. We were going to talk about having a 5-minute shut-off, so let's do that. Philippe, would you like to summarize in 5 minutes your thoughts about the evening, the questions? Are there things that have been answered, things that haven't been answered? What are your concerns? All that sort of stuff. We'll start off with you.
Yes, I'll do that. I wish I could say that my misgivings about the Suidlander policies were relayed. They're not. I wish that I could say that their plan would work, because that would be absolutely brilliant. They're not. I wish we could turn this whole thing around, because when we look at Simon's views and my views, it actually doesn't take a whole lot, because in the old Criminal Procedure Act, there were 2 sections which basically sorted out most problems that we had. One of them is, I think it was Section 42, where we could commit citizens' arrests for a number of very serious offences, first schedule offences, and anything done in our presence. And in Section 49 said that if somebody fled from such an arrest, and the only way to stop him from fleeing was by killing him, that would be a justifiable homicide. That was one of the first things the ANC changed. So if we were allowed to act in terms of law, dealing with crime as we see it, as it approaches us, things would be easy. But that has to be written out of the equation. Now, Simon agreed that small numbers add up to large numbers, and that is my first concern. The other thing you're going to meet are roadblocks, and you're going to have some form of control of riots and unrest. They're going to keep people off the streets if they can. They're going to keep them off the road if they can. They're going to try and keep them away from arms if they can. And that is simply by decree. So if you have a bunch getting out of Dodge and they carry arms contrary to these regulations, and it's simple. The Minister of Police, the Commissioner, can simply declare it. He doesn't have to run it through Parliament. He can simply declare no open carry of firearms in vehicles. When that happens, the whole Suidlander plan is on the skids because you cannot defend yourself. You cannot defend yourself en route. You cannot defend yourself in the interim facilities or in the final facilities.
Right.
You cannot travel there with your guns. And that, I think, is where the plan falls flat, because you might be safer armed in your home than unarmed in the open. You're dealing with undisciplined, rogue security force elements. And I don't think if they see what you have and they want it, and they've got a reason to take it from you, they will. And there's nothing you can do about it. Also, in terms of the current legislation, the full final phase, interim phases, when you meet in collection areas and people mob you, simply mob you, as they do day in, day out in South Africa now. They surround the car, they surround the truck, they help themselves to whatever is there. There is nothing you can do in terms of law. Your life is not at stake. They can take whatever they want. And now you've lost it all. You've lost your car, you've lost your possessions, you may have lost your firearms. Then what? And I know that staying at home is not a good option. But staying at home armed, trying to give the authorities that be as effective as they are a chance to restore some sort of order because the world is watching, may be a better option than being caught, trapped in a catchment area with a whole lot of people who cannot help. The other thing is I have issues with the mix. In the car, you're going to have mom, you're going to have children, you're going to have a dad, you may have some elderly people who cannot defend themselves. And all you need is an idiotic hothead that was the same thing as with the AWB when he opened up on an army truck. It opens up and the car gets taken out. And when that starts, if there are others in the convoy, they will get wrecked as well. It's over before it starts. Imagine that you're in a vehicle strapped in, some idiot does something stupid, who is not under control, and you all get taken out. Now what? And I know you say that not everybody will make it, but the scenario is just not helpful. And what I would like to see to change my mind is that you have a very large-scale exercise with a couple of tens of thousands of people countrywide to see if the scenario works in practice. If it does, I stand corrected. If it doesn't, you've got more work to do.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Philippe. Now, Simon, over to you. You've got 5 minutes to summarize and put your point of view.
If only ifs and ands were pots and pans. The scenario of remaining behind in the suburbs assumes that the government doesn't dispossess people of their weapons through some law beforehand or during that time. So it's no different at all. Assuming that the one set will be dispossessed but that the other set wouldn't for some reason is not really watertight. I emphasize that our plan is, by its very nature, something which can never be perfectly executed, because it will occur in scenarios that are, or in a larger scenario, that makes it very, very challenging. It's like hoping to play a game of rugby in which you don't get tackled, you don't get hurt, you don't get grazes on your knees, you don't get brought to the ground, and you score 100 tries. By definition, this is going to be a very challenging thing to pull off. But it is our belief that it is better than remaining in your suburbs. Philippe's opinion and our opinion are intractable. They cannot be reconciled to one another. That is very clear. Philippe is not alone. There are other individuals and groups in South Africa that agree strongly with him. However, I would point out that we are indisputably, by very, very, very far, the largest organization, right-wing organization in South Africa for a reason. And that is that when people join Suidlanders and when they participate, they gradually come to see more and more and more how the plan makes sense. So it's very seldom that you will find a Suidlander join Suidlanders and then leave saying that the plan is stupid. There may be one or two, but I've never heard of one single Suidlander getting involved in Suidlanders, participating, and then a year down the line saying, well, I was a member for a year, and I served on this committee, and I participated in this, and I familiarized myself with that, and I prepared the other, and I exercised the following, and it's all bunkum. That must count for something. Another thing that must count for something is the fact that we have tremendous support from people who know what they're doing. We recently held a meeting with 9 Special Forces colonels in Griquastad, if anybody knows where that is.
Oh, Griquastad! Absolutely. I know Griquastad very well. Sorry, carry on.
Okay. So, and to a man, they bought into it with absolute enthusiasm. It was incredible, and they are still enthusiastic. We're getting messages every day. They just want to participate more and more and more. They want to bring in more and more and more expertise.
Yeah.
And I think that counts for something. I don't think that it's fair to write off Suidlanders' plan as a layman. I'm not dismissing Philippe. I'm speaking fairly. I believe that it is wrong for a layman to dismiss Suidlanders' plan out of hand when, number one, they're not involved in it, so they don't really know what they're talking about. And number two, the best minds in the world in this field are getting more and more and more and more involved in it. Next, I'd like to make this final point. By remaining, assuming that there are roadblocks, please everybody think logically about this, assuming that there are roadblocks, by remaining, you're remaining where your enemy wants you to be. If he doesn't want you to pass, and you remain where he wants you to be, that surely doesn't make sense. If they are putting up roadblocks to prevent you from leaving, it's because they want you to be there as your enemy. Now, surely that's the very last thing in the whole world, and I include brain cancer in that you want. I'd also like to point out that, again, we have been through this, so I won't elaborate too much, but I'd like to reiterate briefly that in a catastrophic scenario in South Africa, if, for example, Eskom collapses and there is no electricity, that means that water, clean running water, cannot be drawn from the rivers. It cannot be pushed through the purification system, and it cannot be sent up to the tower on top of Northcliffe Hill, which then feeds Northcliffe, Roosevelt Park, Linden, and so on and so forth by gravity. So you've got no water except for your swimming pool water, I mean, honestly. By and large, the people in your suburb will not be prepared. It's optimistic to believe that there will be a whole lot of like-minded people that will hold out in one street or in one block, while the rest starve to death. There will be no sewerage system, because there won't be electricity to pump the sewage through the sewerage system, so it will overflow. There will be far more disease in those suburbs than there will be on a farm where we dig latrine toilets to a specification, an international specification, by the way. And so the list goes on. There will not be food in the Woolworths. It is for that scenario that we are planning. There won't be petrol at that time. You can't at that time say, well, gee, Simon was right, let's move. It will be too late. The roads will then be shut down, and Philippe will be 100% correct. But in the first place, you won't even have fuel to get on the roads because you're going to go to the petrol station. They're going to tell you we don't have electricity and we can't pump fuel for you in most cases. So if anything, you're going to get 150 k's down the road when we need you to drive 600 kilometers. And we need you to leave early. I don't say believe me and don't believe Philippe. I do say this. Our plan is intelligent. It is thorough. It has been worked out very, very carefully by experts who have our people's best interests at heart. If those experts believe that the best thing was to stay at home, then the plan would be based on that. Okay. The reason it isn't is because it isn't.
Simon?
Thank you.
Look, I've got to thank both of you guys for participating. It's been an absolute delightful evening. I mean, we've had some really good interchanges. And I have to say that I actually put Philippe in a difficult position because when he raised the question and you sent a video response, I then suggested the great debate. I kind of trapped Philippe in a position where he, and he very, very admirably agreed to participate. And I think Philippe has raised some very, very interesting points. And I've certainly learnt a lot, and I think everybody watching tonight has learnt a lot more about what Suidlanders is, because we've got down to the nitty-gritty, and Philippe has actually forced that position. And I have to take my hat off to you, Simon, because when the challenge came, you said, look, I was busy that week, and you had all sorts of things happening, but you said, as soon as I'm free, I'm quite happy to come and debate this, and you have. And you have done a fantastic job. And Philippe has raised some, as I said, some really important issues, which for the people out there, it gives them a better understanding of the challenges that Suidlanders face. They now understand that there are problems with roadblocks, and these are sort of things that they need to be aware of. So if they get the warning, if they're members of Suidlanders, they don't frig around, they just get out of there as quickly as they can. So that, I think on that score, it's been a very valuable discussion. Now, in closing this this channel, because I know it's getting really late for you guys, it's now after 11 p.m. in South Africa, I have to tell you, we do have a winner, and the question was asked, those who vote for Simon, vote 1, and those who vote for Philippe, vote 2, and the overwhelming winner by 48 votes to 8 was Simon. So, congratulations, and Philippe. And Philippe, thank you so much for being here. Philippe is a very dear friend of mine. We've got to know each other very well over the last year. And he's an enormous support for this channel with advising people, and he's got a very, very wise head on his shoulders. And Simon, as I said before, it's really appreciated that you participated. As I said, you won the debate quite easily, and I guess that's where we're at. Right now, is there anybody in the side chat who just wants to add anything at all? I think we've been on for over 3 hours now, so I might actually shut down the channel. Is there anything you guys want to say? Philippe, over to you.
Thank you. Carry on.
I think we have in common that we want to walk away from a very bad situation without
too
many scratches, and that those that we love and care for share the same faith, that we all survive it, and that we survive it in one piece, and we all do it our own way. I wish you and yours and your members all the very best. Stay safe. May you all survive it, and survive it in one piece, even against expectations. I hope that you all do well, and that you survive it, and that you're safe, and that you can get a measure of happiness, whatever you do and however you achieve it. And God bless.
Thank you. That's a very gracious valediction. It's much appreciated, Philippe. Thank you for your gracious personality. I was a bit frustrated by you on a few occasions, but all in all, I've gotten the impression that you are a good guy, to put it simply. And
I can vouch for that.
Yeah, and I'd just like to endorse what Scott said about the some of the challenging questions that you raised. It is a very challenging thing. This thing is like putting a rocket in space or building an aircraft carrier, which the whole Chinese nation couldn't do. 1.4 billion people, they had to buy an aircraft carrier under false pretenses from Russia before they could manufacture their first aircraft carrier. There are some things in life that are damn difficult. Even 1.4 billion people can't get right. So what we're dealing with is a very, very, very difficult thing. And you did challenge me, and I think it's right and good that people should hear some of the challenging things that you raised. I have no grievance about that whatsoever. It is right and good. However, if people really want to know, really want to understand, really want to appreciate why it is that we have such world-famous membership, and why our members tend to stay on good terms with us, they should join, they should get involved, they should learn more about the plan, they should make contacts, they should exchange details, they should learn the routes, the safest routes, they should learn when they should leave, etc., etc., etc. I think I've been through it all well enough tonight. And God willing, that will spare them or spare their loved ones in the time that lies ahead. Finally, Scott, thank you very much for facilitating this. It is appreciated. And I say God bless you, to you, Philippe, and to your people. May God grant you strength in the time that lies ahead of us. That certainly seems to lie ahead of us now. And may God bless you, Scott, for the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much. Now, I just want to close with one simple statement, and that is that a plan B is better than no plan. All right, guys, look, thank you all for participating in the great debate. I'm going to now shut down the live stream here with Simon and Philippe. They both probably want to get off to bed. And thank you guys so much. It's really been appreciated. Take care. Bye for now.
Cheers, Philippe. Nice to meet you.
Stay safe. We're actually on the same side.
I'd like to believe that.
Okay, guys, there you had it. The live debate. Wasn't that a cracker? What two great guys they are, aren't they? Now, I just want to just say thank you for all the people who participated here tonight. If we missed your questions, I do apologize, but wow, you know, we had about 2,000 or 3,000 IMs in the side chat, and I know Glenn was harnessing all the questions. And we try to get through as many of them as we can. But we're going to have a cracker of a live stream next weekend. I'll tell you more about it during the week. And have a great evening and a lovely day. I'm going to shut down now and wish you all the best. Take care, guys. And thanks especially to Glenn for his harnessing those questions for me. It must have been a heck of a job. All right, guys. Take care. Bye for now.